Season 5 of Game of Thrones was the moment that marked a certain point of no return. While there previously existed fans who assured the adaptation, Season 5 was when a great deal of book fans who did like the show began steadily turning against it. Season 5 was when George R.R. Martin's strong involvement in the show ended. Previously, he was a co-executive producer and wrote one episode per season. Those were The Pointy End, Blackwater, The Bear and the Maiden Fair, and The Lion and the Rose. George's departure from the show was there because he wished to focus on writing The Winds of Winter, as the show approached the books quicker than it was expected. Season 5 thus saw heavy divergences from the source material in most, if not all, storylines, and that too was explained away by the lack of source material to rely on. They ran out of books to adapt. But this truism is actually false, as most of the last two books in the franchise, A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, were straight up not adapted at all, not only in the case of Daenerys, but other characters as well. Years later, Martin commented on this by saying, "By season 5 and 6, and certainly 7 and 8, I was pretty much out of the loop." Asked why that was, he said, "I don't know. You have to ask Dan and David." Meaning that while his official involvement in the show ended, he likely still offered Benioff and Weiss his creative consultancy, something they did not utilize, and it shows. At first glance, the general bits of the plot in Meereen were adapted. Daenerys rules a city whose former slaving elite violently resists her. But the biggest problem is that the show did not bother adapting the central themes of this storyline, the limits of compromise, and Aragorn's tax policy. Dany's storyline in Meereen in the books is about how much she is willing to sacrifice for the illusion of peace. But since her show self never truly had a reflection about her previous failures in Yunkai and Astapor, and was in the give them fire and blood mindset beginning to end, the central conflict was rendered unadaptable. Before we start, remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share, so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. Also, you can listen to this on Spotify if you prefer. Check the link in the description. The fourth and fifth book of the series, respectively A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, happen simultaneously, but they are split by location. Feast covers King's Landing, Riverlands, the Vale, Iron Islands, Dorne, Bravos and Old Town, whereas Dance covers the Wall, the Free Cities, Slaver's Bay and the North. You can even read them like that. I personally recommend the boiled leather reading order. As such, some POVs are absent from Feast, including Daenerys, though her presence is felt strongly. "Not all," said Aleras. "The Beggar King has a sister." "I thought her head was smashed against the wall," said Rune. "No," said Aleras. "It was Prince Rhaegar's young son Aegon, whose head was dashed against the wall by the Lion of Lannister's brave men. We speak of Rhaegar's sister, born on Dragonstone before its fall. The one they called Daenerys. The Stormborn. I recall her now." Molander lifted his tankard hide, sloshing the cider that remained. "Here's to her. No one ever looked for a girl," he said. "It was a prince that was promised, not a princess. Rhaegar, I thought. The smoke was from the fire that devoured Summerhall on the day of his birth, the salt from the tears shed for those who died. He shared my belief when he was young, but later he became persuaded that it was his own son who fulfilled the prophecy, for a comet had been seen above King's Landing, on the night Aegon was conceived, and Rhaegar was certain the breeding star had to be a comet. What fools we were, who thought ourselves so wise. The error crept in from the translation. Dragons are neither male nor female. Barth saw the truth of that, but now one and now the other, as changeable as flame. The language misled us all for 1,000 years. Daenerys is the one, born amidst salt and smoke. The dragons prove it. Just talking of her seemed to make him stronger. I must go to her, I must. Would that I was even 10 years younger. This sword is wrong, she has to know that. Light without heat, an empty glamour. This sword is wrong, and the false light can only lead us deeper into darkness, son. Daenerys is our hope. Tell them that, at the Citadel. Make them listen. They must send her a maester. Daenerys must be consoled, taught, protected. For all these years I've lingered, waiting, watching, and now that the day has dawned, I am too old. I am dying, son. Daenerys is the only hope, he concluded. Aemon said the Citadel must send her a maester at once, to bring her home to Westeros before it is too late. Maester Aemon believed that Daenerys Targaryen was the fulfillment of a prophecy. Her, not Stannis, not Prince Rhaegar, not the princeling whose head was dashed against the wall. Daenerys' storyline is often accused of being too disconnected from the main plot, but these passages prove otherwise. The Westerosi do hear of her, and lo and behold, nobody expresses hatred and disdain towards her, even though the fandom insists that everyone not only will hate her once she lands in Westeros, but that they already despise her. That is because they themselves hate and despise her and wish that the characters followed suit. But if they actually read the book, something most of them don't do, they would know that this is not true. Random guys string to her health, and Maester Aemon proclaims her as the true Azor Ahai, as opposed to the actual red herring Stannis Baratheon. George himself stated numerous times that his biggest grievance with regards to the split between feast and dance was that the character of Cersei and Daenerys won't be contrasted directly. Cersei and Daenerys are intended as parallel characters, each exploring a different approach to how a woman would rule in a male-dominated, medieval-inspired fantasy world. George regrets that Daenerys and Dany will not be contrasted directly. For more on that, see this video. Before we go into Season 5, we will deal with the scenes from Season 4 I cut from the previous release, since some of those are from A Dance with Dragons, and the video was already long as shit. In the last episode of Season 4, Daenerys holds court in Meereen. A slight improvement in set design shows that the subjects don't stand at the bottom of the stairs anymore, but are almost at the same level as Daenerys, though she is slightly above them nonetheless, and they still need to climb these stairs to face her. The man is a freedman who was a tutor to the affluent master of Meereen. When Daenerys took the city, the children begged the old man to not leave the house, and now he lives on the street. He informs Daenerys that the places of shelter she established are chaotic and lawless, something Daenerys is apparently ignorant of. Dany promises to send the Unsullied to re-establish order, but the man says that this is moot, as he does not have what he had previously, a possession of respect, love and stability. The man then asks to be allowed to sell himself back to slavery, as he is too old to find a place for himself in the new order, and that many others want to follow suit. Daenerys concedes, saying that freedom means making choices, and allows the man to be re-employed on a yearly contract with the former master. Barristan warns that the masters will take advantage of the situation, and that the re-employed freedmen will now be slaves in all but name. The issue of people selling themselves back into slavery is something covered in the books as well. "We have no slaves for sale," said Dany. "My queen," Dario stepped forward. "The riverside is full of Meereenese, begging leave to be allowed to sell themselves to this Carthian. They are thicker than the flies." Dany was shocked. "They want to be slaves. The ones who come are well-spoken and gently born, sweet queen. Such slaves are prized. In the free cities, they will be tutors, scribes, bed slaves, even healers and priests. They will sleep in soft beds, eat rich foods, and dwell in manses. Here they have lost all, and live in fear and squalor. I see. Perhaps it was not so shocking, if these tales of Astapor were true." Dany thought a moment. "Any man who wishes to sell himself into slavery may do so, or woman." She raised a hand. "But they may not sell their children, nor a man his wife. In Astapor, the city took a 10th part of the price, each time a slave changed hands," Missandei told her. "We will do the same," Dany decided. Wars were won with gold as much as swords. A 10th part, in gold or silver coin or ivory. Meereen has no need of saffron, cloves, or Zor's hides. "It shall be done as you command, glorious queen," said Dario. "My Stormcrows will collect your 10th. If the Stormcrows saw the collections, at least half the gold would somehow go astray, Dany knew. But the second sons were just as bad, and the Unsullied were as unlettered as they were incorruptible. Records must be kept," she said. seek among the freedmen for men who can read, write, and do sums. Crucially, the people who want to sell themselves back into slavery want to be sold to Karcz, not in Meereen, and Daenerys wants to discourage the practice by imposing a punitive tax on it, a suggestion made by a former slave Missandei, who at 10 already advises Dany on taxes. Adult show Missandei only translates, and her political and economic acumen is dropped by the adaptation. I've already explained many times what a punitive tax is, so I won't be repeating myself. I will just say, anyone who concludes that this scene proves that Daenerys profits off of slavery doesn't have a basic grasp on taxes or anything at all, really. The show continues to portray Dany's liberation campaign as short-sighted and leaves out her implementing solutions to alleviate that very issue and discourage the practice by imposing a tax. That, coupled with the discontent the former slaves have with her in Season 5 and the removal of freedmen supporting Daenerys, makes it seem like she was in the wrong to even embark on this campaign. Should you reach your queen, give her a message from the slaves of Old Volantis. She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek, where her tears had been cut away. Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon. Daenerys Targaryen was wed, the guards on the pens had told them, laughing. She had taken a Meereenese slaver as her king, as wealthy as he was noble, and when the peace was signed and sealed, the fighting pits of Meereen would open once again. Other slaves insisted that the guards were lying, that Daenerys Targaryen would never make peace with slavers. Nisa, they called her. Someone told him that meant mother. Soon the Silver Queen would come forth from her city, smash the Yunkai, and break their chains, they whispered to one another. This isn't the showrunners trying to show how the slaves may internalize their enslavement, something George R.R. Martin does show in the books. The most insidious thing about bondage was how easy it was to grow accustomed to it. The life of most slaves was not at all that different from the life of a serving man at Casterly Rock, it seemed to him. True, some slave owners and their overseers were brutal and cruel, but the same was true of some Westerosi lords and their stewards and bailiffs. Most of the Yunkai treated their chattels decently enough, so long as they did their jobs and caused no trouble. And this old man in his rusted collar, with his fierce loyalty to Lord Wobblecheeks, his owner, was not at all atypical. This is the showrunners condemning Daenerys for that campaign, a continued pattern of apologetics towards slavery. As you might remember in previous episodes, Jorah insisted that there are good masters who deserve to be spared and respected. The master of the scholar is precisely that good master. This creates a situation in which slavery itself isn't the problem, it's the mini slave masters, and that it would simply be preferable to convince the slavers to be nice to their chattel than to outlaw the institution entirely. We will not cover Season 6 in this series, unless The Winds of Winter ever comes out, in which case I will gladly compare them, but you might remember that during Dany's absence in Meereen, Tyrion proposes a 10-year transition plan in which slavery would gradually be outlawed, and while he faces opposition from Missandei and Grey Worm, this is also shown as a reasonable way to approach it. This explains why the showrunners never bothered to have Daenerys tone down her campaign in fears of embracing fire and blood. It is other people who suggest gradual approach and compromise, and she reluctantly follows suit. In Season 6, Episode 9, Tyrion even dares compare Dany's fire and blood mindset to that of Aerys Targaryen. Confederacy show, remember. Coming back to the slave scholar, this exchange ignores one crucial thing. Slaves that are pampered and loved by their masters, as well as slaves that are skilled craftsmen, are in a minority. Not only that, their position is not and has never been stable. Relying solely on the benevolence of the slave master means walking on a very shaky ground. Who is to say that the master won't change his mind any day for any reason? This freedman is an old man. What happens to him when he's hit with dementia or cannot fulfill his duties anymore for other reasons? Moreover, if the master of the scholar liked the man so much, what stopped him from re-employing him as a free man and paying him for his services? The great majority of slaves in Meereen are not willing to sell themselves into slavery. In fact, they are willing to endure economic hardships if it means their freedom. But because we are not shown that perspective, Daenerys and her campaign are made to seem unreasonable and short-sighted. Something that, of course, influences how the book's storyline is discussed, as show Daenerys isn't really seen alleviating her mistakes or learning from them, and lacks self-criticism and self-reflection. Afterwards, Daenerys is approached by a man carrying a bundle with unknown contents, and right as he begins to speak, Dany knows that this time this isn't a goat. When she later discusses this issue with Missandei and Grey Worm, she holds the dragon fang necklace she wore in some previous scenes, as if she were to discard it, which is a nice touch. Drogon is absent, but Daenerys decides to chain her two remaining dragons, who won't be referred to by name until season 5. I have watched this scene probably hundreds of times, and I still have tears in my eyes, especially when I remember that the track that plays in the background is called Breaker of Chains, a melody that will make a small cameo in the prequel 8 years later. This beautiful, self-sacrificing act of the Breaker of Shackles, chaining her children in the darkness, will unfortunately be undermined by season 8, and also much earlier, in season 5. Dany's appearance in the Wars to Come opens with the Harpy of Meereen getting removed from the Great Pyramid. Long overdue, but good that it finally happened. An unsullied man called White Rat, overseeing it, then goes to a brothel, where he pays to be held, but has his throat slit by a man wearing a golden mask, with the woman clearly being his accomplice. Upon learning this, Daenerys orders White Rat to be publicly buried in the Temple of the Graces. Barristan objects, claiming that it will only rouse the anger of the Meereenese elite, but one of her freedman advisors, Mossador, is out for blood. Daenerys sides with him, saying that angry snakes lash out and it will make chopping their heads all that easier. Daenerys then orders the Unsullied to investigate the murder. Missandei asks Grey Worm why an Unsullied would be in a brothel in the first place, since they're all castrated, but he responds that he doesn't know. Roughly the same happens in ADWD Daenerys 1, where Dany is awoken by the news of a very similar murder of a man called Stalwart Shield, but in the books she does learn in what context, whereas in the show nobody tells her. Even those who lack a man's parts might still have a man's heart, your grace, said Grey Worm. This one has been told that your servant Stalwart Shield sometimes gave coin to the women of the brothels to lie with him and hold him. The blood of the dragon does not weep. Stalwart Shield, she said dry-eyed. That was his name. Additionally, in the books, Daenerys doesn't have the Unsullied buried in the Giscari rites, but according to what I assume are Unsullied rites. Stalwart Shield shall not be forgotten. Have him washed and dressed for battle, and bury him with cap and shield and spears. It shall be as your grace commands, said Grey Worm. And rather than to send the Unsullied to just investigate, Dany approaches the investigation with more care and intelligence. Send men to the Temple of the Graces and ask if any man has come to the Blue Graces with a sword wound. And spread the word that we will pay good gold for the short sword of Stalwart Shield. Inquire of the butchers and the herdsmen, and learn who has been gelding goats of late. Perhaps some goat-herd would confess. Henceforth, no man of mine walks alone after dark. This once shall obey. And the part of stuffing goat genitalia into the victim's mouth to mock his castration was also omitted. Before we get into the plot of the rest of the episode, there is something else I want to point out. I've alluded previously that even the costume designers had an agenda against Daenerys, and it may sound absurd to make this accusation, almost like I believe that everyone and everything is against Daenerys, but finally in this part I can prove to you that this was the case. This season she wears a lot of white and dove grey. Now she's got this sense of power and also a sense of immortality, Clapton says. I wanted to give this rather untouchable quality to her. The idea behind the white and pale grey is the sense of removal, a removal from reality. A book reader will know that the opposite happened in the original novels. Rather than to remove herself from her subjects, Daenerys reluctantly assimilates into the Giscari culture by wearing their garments. Dany had wanted to ban the Tok'ra when she took Meereen, but her advisors had convinced her otherwise. The Mother of Dragons must don the Tok'ra, or be forever hated, warned the Green Grace, Galaza Galar. In the wools of Westeros or a gown of Myrish lace, your radiance shall forever remain a stranger amongst us, a grotesque outlander, a barbarian conqueror. Meereen's queen must be a lady of old Gis. Brown Van Plum, the captain of the Second Sons, had put it more succinctly. Man wants to be the king of rabbits, he best wear a pair of floppy ears. And I know that we are supposed to discuss season 5, but this isn't the only time Michelle Clapton, chief costume designer for Daenerys, made decisions that showed her disdain towards the character. I felt like this was her dressing to rescue someone because she felt for them, rather than as a move to acquire more power. It was a romantic coat. It was something she wanted to wear, that she would be noticed in. She was like a descending angel. It was nothing to do with her personal gain. And it was very practical, because she's riding a dragon. Someone should tell this woman that she designed a costume involving a slave collar to have Daenerys show solidarity with the slaves she was freeing in Slaver's Bay. Another move that had nothing to do with personal gain in an arc that lasted several seasons. And she worked on most of them. And another one. Dany also starts wearing a dragon chain across her torso, meant to be a stand-in for a crown, which she can't wear yet because she's not officially a queen. I like that she's wearing everything she can to show her status, but she can't wear the crown because it would be wearing it before it was due. You can see in a way that Dany is dressing that she's almost assuming the power, but not quite. The width of the shoulders give her strength, the chain gives her strength, Clapton told the Insider. Oh, great! Thanks for telling us that her being a queen of Meereen was just a paid internship, one during which, in the books, she does wear a crown. Edie fetched her crown, wrought in the shape of the three-headed dragon of her house. Its corsewell gold, its wings silver, the three heads ivory, onyx, and jade. Dany's neck and shoulders would be stiff and sore from the weight of it before the day was done. A crown should not sit easy on the head. One of her royal forebears had said that once. Not only that, characters who were just claimants for the Iron Throne like Daenerys wore crowns, like Renly for example. I suppose a Fakas chain is better in this instance. But anyway, Hisdar and Daario returned from Yunkai and Hisdar is surprised to see unsullied patrols on the streets. Hisdar reports that his mission in Yunkai was a great success and that the city will now be ruled by a council of freedmen and former slave owners, while they will seek Dany's advice in most important matters. Hisdar then brings forward the idea of reopening the fighting pits. Dany declines and the dialogue implies that this isn't the first time they're having this conversation, as she bluntly cuts him off. This is a point of contention between Dany and Hisdar in the books as well, though Hisdar's mission to Yunkai doesn't happen until later in ADWD, and Hisdar has far different motivations for the reopening of the pits. When Dany had closed the city's fighting pits, the value of pit shares had plummeted. Hisdar Zolorak had grabbed them up with both hands, and now owned most of the fighting pits in Meereen. The nobleman had wings of wiry red-black hair sprouting from his temples. They made him look as if his head was about to take flight. His long face was made even longer by a beard bound with rings of gold. His purple tokar was fringed with amethysts and pearls. Your Radiance will know the reason I am here. Why, it must be because you have no other purpose but to plague me. How many times have I refused you? 5 times, Your Magnificence. 6 now. I will not have the fighting pits reopened. If Your Majesty will hear my arguments, I have. 5 times. Have you brought new arguments? Old arguments, Hisdar admitted. New words. Lovely words. And courteous. More apt to move a queen. It is your cause I find wanting, not your courtesies. I have heard your arguments so often I could plead your case myself. Shall I? Dany leaned forward. The fighting pits have been a part of Meereen since the city was founded. The combats are profoundly religious in nature, a blood sacrifice to the gods of Gis. The mortal art of Gis is not mere butchery, but a display of courage, skill, and strength most pleasing to your gods. Victorious fighters are pampered and acclaimed, and the slain are honored and remembered. By reopening the pits, I would show the people of Meereen that I respect their ways and customs. The pits are far famed across the world. They draw trade to Meereen, and fill the city's coffers with coin from the ends of the earth. All men share a taste for blood, a taste the pits help slake. In that way, they make Meereen more tranquil. For criminals condemned to die upon the sands, the pits represent a judgment by battle, a last chance for a man to prove his innocence. She leaned back again, with a toss of her head. There, how have I done? Your Radiance has stated the case much better than I could have hoped to do myself. I see that you are as eloquent as you are beautiful. I am quite persuaded. She had to laugh. But I am not. This shows that Dany is well familiar with Hisdar's justifications for the reopening of the pits, as she'd heard them before, and Book Hisdar doesn't have to explain to her patiently like to a child. And once more, Book Hisdar is entirely self-serving in his desire to reopen the fighting pits, Whereas for show Hisdar, it is a matter of cultural preservation and one of the prerequisites for the peace in Yunkai. For the record, in the book, the peace in Yunkai entails something else entirely. Skahas tells me you have had messages of late. I have. Hisdar crossed his long legs. He looked pleased with himself. Yunkai will give us peace, but for a price. The disruption of the slave trade has caused great injury throughout the civilized world. Yunkai and her allies will require an indemnity of us, to be paid in gold and gemstones. Gold and gems were easy. What else? The Yunkai will resume slaving, as before, as Tapor will be rebuilt, as a slave city. You will not interfere. The Yunkai resumed their slaving before I was 2 leagues from their city. Did I turn back? King Clown begged me to join with him, against them, and I turned a deaf ear to his pleas. I want no war with Yunkai. How many times must I say it? What promises do they require? Ah, there is the thorn in the bower, my queen, said Hisdar Zolorak. Sad to say, Yunkai has no faith in your promises. They keep plucking the same string on the harp about some envoy that your dragons set on fire. Only his Tokar was burned, said Dany scornfully. Be that as it may, they do not trust you. The men of New Geese feel the same. Words are wind, as you yourself have so oft said. No words of yours will secure this peace for Meereen. Your foes require deeds. They would see us wed, and they would see me crowned as king, to rule beside you. So the peace with Yunkai rests on Dany marrying Hisdar as a guarantee of peace, as well as resuming slavery in the city proper. Book Daenerys is basically coerced into marrying Hisdar, whereas show Daenerys... well, we will soon see. Show Daenerys and show Daario continue to be intimate, whereas in the books it does not happen until much later and lasts a very short time. Daario is also in favor of reopening the fighting pits and explains that he himself was a slave fighting in the pits. A bit of backstory that is absent from his book character. Daario tells Dany that she is not the mother of Unsullied, but mother of dragons. Patently false. There is a reason why Daenerys is called a mother by the freedmen, including the Unsullied. Hisdar's blunder with Grey Worm had cost him the Unsullied. When his grace had tried to put him under the command of a cousin, as he had the Brazen Beasts, Grey Worm had informed the king that they were free men who took commands only from their mother. I of course understand what Daario means here, use your dragons, but this isn't the first time Dany's motherhood is being downplayed. The same happened in season 2, when Jorah says that the dragons aren't really her children and she isn't really a mother. Dany insists on keeping the dragons locked, since she does not want another child's bones dropped at her feet. Too bad she will slaughter hundreds of them 3 years later. By the end of the episode, Dany goes to see the chained dragons, but they react with aggression upon seeing her. This is the first time she refers to them by names, by the way. It's clear that, even if she were to release them, she no longer controls them. The show does not really bother to include scenes of Daenerys holding court. Sure, in the previous seasons we've had some supplicants speak to her directly, but when this is the crucial theme of her arc, then it is gone. And it is the crucial theme of her arc. Dany as queen, struggling with rule. So many books don't do that. There is a sense when you're writing something in high fantasy, you're in a dialogue with all other high fantasy writers that have written. And there is always this presumption that if you are a good man, you will be a good king. Like Tolkien. In Return of the King, Aragorn comes back and becomes king. And then we read that he ruled wisely for 300 years. Okay, fine. It is easy to write that sentence, he ruled wisely. What does that mean, he ruled wisely? What were his tax policies? What did he do when 2 lords were making war on each other? Or barbarians were coming in from the north? What was his immigration policy? What about equal rights for orcs? I mean, did he just pursue a genocidal policy? Let's kill all these fucking orcs who are still left over. Or did he try to redeem them? You never actually see the nitty-gritty of ruling. I guess there's an element of fantasy readers that don't want to see that. I find that fascinating. Seeing someone like Dany actually trying to deal with the vestments of being a queen and getting factions and guilds and managing the economy. They burned all the fields in Meereen. They've got nothing to import anymore. They're not getting any money. I find this stuff interesting. Unfortunately, enough of my readers who love the books do as well. Villeneuve and Weiss do not count themselves among these enough, since they never really showed Daenerys dealing with the vestments of being a queen. She does not manage the economy, pass taxes, and the bulk of her ruling is done off-screen, if it is done at all. We also meet 2 characters that the show cut, Reznak Moreznak and Skahas Mokandak. Reznak and Skahas waited atop the marble steps. Great queen, declared Reznak Moreznak. You are so radiant today, I fear to look on you. The seneschal wore a tokar of maroon silk with a golden fringe. A small damp man, he smelled as if he had bathed in perfume, and spoke a bastard form of High Valyrian, much corrupted and flavoured with a thick Giscari growl. The seneschal was as bald as Skahas, though in his case the gods were responsible. Should any hair be so insolent as to appear, my barber stands with razor ready, he had assured her when she raised him up. There were times when Dany wondered if the razor might not be better saved for Reznak's throat. He was a useful man, but she liked him little and trusted him less. The undying of Karcz had told her she would be thrice betrayed. Miri Mazdur had been the first, Ser Jorah the second. Would Reznak be the third, the shave-pate, Dario? Or will it be someone I would never suspect, Ser Barristan or Grey Worm or Missandei? My queen, rolled Skahas Mokandak, of the shaven head. His curly hair was dense and wiry. It had long been the fashion for the men of the slaver cities to tease it into horns and spikes and wings. By shaving, Skahas had pulled old Mirin behind him to accept the new, and his kin had done the same after his example. Others followed, though whether from fear, fashion or ambition, Dany could not say. Shave-pates, they were called. Skahas was the shave-pate, and the vilest of traitors to the sons of the Harpy and their ilk. While Reznak doesn't do a lot, Skahas does, and as his role in this story becomes more prominent, we will discuss him separately. Right now, we'll put a pin on it. In any case, aside from the murder of Stalwart Shield, these are the issues Daenerys deals with in Daenerys I ADWD. An Astapori envoy Gael visits Meereen once more, bearing gifts from the Butcher King Cleon and suggesting that Astapor and Meereen ally and go against Yunkai. Hizar comes to ask about reopening the fighting pits. I showed their conversation earlier. The noble Grazdan Zogalare, cousin of the Green Grace, comes to ask for the portion of the earnings made by the freedwomen who opened the loom. He believes they owe their craft to him, as he was the one who had his slave teach them, and wants a portion of their earnings. Dany declines, citing the fact that Grazdan forgot the name of the slave. Remember this because this situation will become important later. A rich woman comes, saying that her house was turned into a brothel and that the freedmen who now live there stole her belongings. Dany cannot return the house to her, but orders that her jewels be returned to her. A freedman comes to complain that the freedwoman he took to wife is carrying a child of a former slave master. He wants the master gelded for the crime of rape and to get gold for raising a child that isn't his by blood. Dany grants him gold, but not the gelding, since if she gelded every slave master who forced himself onto a bad slave, she would have to castrate everyone. A young boy comes, saying that his mother, brother and father were murdered by the freedmen, and his mother raped as well. And one of the murderers still lives in his house. Dany has no choice but to deny him, since she cannot punish the slaves for raising against their masters. The boy lunges towards her, but Belva stops him, and Dany lets him go. Yet as he leaves, Dany knows that the Harpy has another son. A sculptor comes, proposing to create a new Harpy sculpture with the one cast in Dany's image, but she politely declines. Some fisher folk give her a big fish they caught in the river. An armorer gives her beautiful armor, and while she thanks him for the gift, she thinks to herself that she prefers to be clad in steel, should she ever go to battle. The show, as per usual, omitted cute and whimsical Dany moments. The slippers the Butcher King had sent her had grown too uncomfortable. Dany kicked them off and sat with one foot tucked beneath her, and the other swinging back and forth. It was not a very regal pose, but she was tired of being regal. The crown had given her a headache, and her buttocks had gone to sleep. Ser Barristan, she called, I know what quality a king needs most. Courage, your grace. Cheeks like iron, she teased. All I do is sit. There's another very important exchange later. 3 and 20, Dany cited. My dragons have developed a prodigious taste for mutton, since we began to pay the shepherds for their kills. Have these claims been proven? Some men have bought burnt bones. Men make fires, men cook mutton. Burnt bones prove nothing. Brown Ben says there are red wolves in the hills outside the city, and jackals and wild dogs. Must we pay good silver for every lamb that goes astray between Yunkai and this Kahadazan? No, magnificence, Reznak bowed. Shall I send these rascals away, or will you want them scourged? Daenerys shifted on the bench. No man should ever fear to come to me. Some claims were false, she did not doubt, but more were genuine. Surely an evil genocidal tyrant in the making. The chapter ends with a certain man bringing the burned remains of his daughter, like in the children. In this episode, Grey Worm and Dario find their way to the place where they suspect Sons of the Harpy might be hiding, seemingly deserted. Dario, however, finds a man hiding behind a wall. They arrest him and find suspicious items all around him. I have no idea why the guy was even there, just lurking. alongside his weapons and the golden mask that implicates him on the spot, other than he's the dumbest criminal in Planetos, but they arrest him. Mosador wants the man executed, but Barristan urges restraint, instead suggesting to interrogate the man. Dario says that it's not necessary, as he already questioned him. Hisdar notes that he was not a particularly wealthy man, and that the return of slavery would not benefit him. Mosador disagrees. Daenerys quite rightfully points out that the mere fact that he was above someone in the hierarchy was motive enough to become a son of the Harpy. According to Mosador, the wealthier great masters pay the poorer ones to do their bidding. Barristan urges Daenerys to put the man on a trial to show the Myrines that she is better than the masters. Mosador disagrees, saying that mercy and free trial mean nothing to them. Dany dismisses everyone, but Barristan stays behind, and they have this conversation.
Your Grace, a word, please, I beg you.
About what?
About your father. About the Mad King.
The Mad King? You're here to remind me of my enemy's lies? Consider me reminded.
Your Grace, I served in his King's Guard. I was at his side from the first. Your enemies did not lie.
Go on.
When the people rose in revolt against him, your father set their towns and castles aflame. He murdered sons in front of their fathers. He burned men alive with wildfire and laughed as they screamed. And his efforts to stamp out dissent led to a rebellion that killed every Targaryen, except 2.
I'm not my father.
No, Your Grace. Thank the gods. But the Mad King gave his enemies the justice he thought they deserved. And each time it made him feel powerful and right until the very end.
I will not have the son of the Harpy executed without a fair trial.
For such a short scene, there's a lot of layers here, and I will love nothing more than to shred them all to pieces. First thing I want to note is how hollow this conversation is compared to the one Barristan and Daenerys have in A Storm of Swords. What contributed most to it was the dropping of Barristan's disguise as Arstan, and the fact that he observed Daenerys before he revealed himself, having concluded that Dany is most certainly not like Aerys. Here, however, he still has that thinly veiled presumption that there's something wrong with Dany and he needs to warn her against letting herself become like Aerys. The pattern of the men around Dany treating her like a dog in need of leashing continues. The reveal that Aerys really was mad also comes long overdue, and the placement isn't accidental either. It's here to compare Dany's wish to deal with her enemies, the slave masters who murder innocent freedmen such as White Rat with impunity, as a choice comparable to Aerys burning people alive for personal slights. But why is this conversation even here? Daenerys barely speaks during the council meeting and doesn't make a firm stance on what she is going to do with the son of the Harpy. She sides neither with Mosador, nor with Dario, nor with Hisdar, and later on she follows Barristan's counsel. That is the thing with the showrunners. It seems like they are on the fence as to whether she is a Mad Queen in the making or not. If she was just like Aerys, then she would disregard Barristan's advice and do what her yes men tell her to do. But she doesn't have yes men. Her counsel is varied and other people are able to persuade her to change her mind a lot of the times. And while she is initially dismissive of Barristan's claim of Aerys being the Mad King, she then herself urges him to continue. And Barristan is twice the fool, given that yes, in retrospect, Daenerys is just like her father. And the justification the show is going to give to it in several years is because she killed people who own human beings like chattel and slaughtered them in moments of intimacy and vulnerability. This conversation is what perhaps starts the chain of anachronisms in the expectations placed on Daenerys. Fair trial for a murderer employed by domestic terrorists is not something anyone would have suggested in earnest in the context of this story. It's the showrunners suddenly making the characters around Daenerys develop 21st century morality. And only Daenerys, it must be highlighted. For one, nobody suggested fair trial for Janos Slynt, who didn't commit vile hate crimes against people freed from slavery, but merely refused to follow an order. Why should Daenerys be the one to exercise restraint? Else she's just like the Mad King, who murdered people for personal slights. And how come this former slaver is considered equivalent to the victims of the Mad King? The show continues the streak of apologetics towards slavery. It seems to me like the showrunners leaned towards it almost by instinct, perhaps due to the false belief that, in the world of Azoyav, there are no 100% good people, nor 100% bad people, everyone is grey. Yet this treatment certainly isn't given to other despicable figures in the show. such as Ramsay Bolton or Walder Frey. Nobody suggests that Ramsay should be put on trial rather than to be fed to his own dogs. Nobody suggests that Walder Frey should be put on trial rather than have his sons baked into pies, fed to him, have his throat slit, and then extinguish the entire male line of his house. Slavers and their allies, however, should be put on a trial. Again, I will never shut up about that Confederacy show they wanted to make. In that world, you do not deal with domestic terrorists by fair trials, because they don't have the ICC or Geneva Conventions, all fairly recent inventions. The showrunners first placed a higher moral standard on Daenerys and then condemned her for explicitly following it, since when she does decide to settle this on a trial, they prevent the narrative from actually implementing it and make her do this absurd thing later that undermines it all. The showrunners thus create a convoluted mess of unfair expectations, non-sequitur causation effect, hypocrisy, and double standards in an attempt to demonize Daenerys and make her seem laughably incompetent. But the joke is, they're themselves too incompetent to actually make it work. Either you write your Mad Queen in the making, or you make her concede to her advisors, seek their advice, and make her be willing to listen to opposition. In any case, Mossadegh executes the master on his own, as is his God-given right that I shall never condemn. Daenerys says that Mossadegh had no right to act like this, as there are no more masters and slaves in Meereen, but Mossadegh disagrees, pointing out that they still sit in their pyramids and plot. Strangely, we never meet those masters. In any case, Mossadegh rightfully says that if the Harpy continues to ravage the city and murder the freedmen, then soon she will enslave everyone back, and the deaths of the slaves who perish in the fight for their freedom was for nothing. Daenerys, while moved, says that Mossadegh had no right to kill the man awaiting trial, and orders Mossadegh to be taken away. Execution time. The slaves call out Misa to her, while the masters, none of which we know by name, just look with apprehension. Hisdar tells Daario that a public execution was a bad idea. Yeah man, if only we knew who was responsible for forcing this scene to happen. Then he speaks to the slaves and explains that justice must be served. The former slaves cheer for Mossadegh as he begs for her mercy one last time. Daario kills him, the freedmen start hissing, and a riot breaks out between the slaves and the masters. Daenerys is forced to flee the scene. Some ex-slaves even throw stones in Dany's direction. In the evening, Dany is visibly pained by what has happened and wants to be left alone. As she steps into a balcony, Drogon suddenly appears, but leaves just as quickly. Now, take a wild fucking guess how much of this actually happened in the books. You have 5 seconds. None. None, and I say none of this happened in the books. Every time you see people claim that even the former slaves turned against Daenerys, and even they hate her, every time someone yaps about Misa is a master, they talk about the show. In the books, Mossadegh is an entirely different character. He doesn't kill anyone. There is no trial or anything of the sort. And there are certainly no riots against Dany. Mossadegh is not a Meereenese freedman, portrayed as a rabid dog, unjustly obsessed with revenge on people who own him like chattel. He is an Unsullied, Missandei's brother, and actually a victim of the Sons of the Harpy. How many dead? Reznak wrung his hands. 9. Magnificence. Full work it was, and wicked. A dreadful night. Dreadful. 9. The word was a dagger in her heart. Every night the shadow war was waged anew, beneath the stepped pyramids of Meereen. Every morn the sun rose upon fresh corpses, with harpies drawn in blood on the bricks beside them. And the freedman who became too prosperous, or too outspoken, was marked for death. 9 in one night, though. That frightened her. Tell me, Grey Worm answered. Your servants were set upon as they walked the bricks of Meereen, to keep your grace's peace. All were well armed, with spears and shields and short swords. 2 by 2 they walked, and 2 by 2 they died. Your servants Blackfist and Ceteris were slain by crossbow bolts in Mazdan's maze. Your servants Mossadegh and Duran were crushed by falling stones beneath the river wall. Your servants Eladon Goldenhair and Loyal Spear were poisoned at a wine shop, when they were accustomed to stop each night upon their runs. Mossadegh. Dany made a fist, had been taken from their home on Nav by riders from the Basilisk Isles and sold into slavery in Astapor. Young as she was, Missandei had shown such a gift for Tanges that the good masters had made a scribe of her. Mosador and Marcellan had not been so fortunate. They had been gelded and made into unsullied. Notice how the murders committed by the sons of the Harpy are significantly toned down in the show. In fact, there is only a singular murder, that of White Rat, whereas in the books we know of the following deaths: Stalwart Shield, Black Fist, Ceteris, Mosador, Duran, Eladon Goldenhair, Loya Spear, all unsullied, and later we also learn that 3 freedmen were murdered: Moneylender, Cobbler, and Harpy's Rilonari. And the reasons why these murders are committed is not random. It's the freedmen who become too outspoken and too prosperous that are targets, to discourage them from receiving political representation and making an honest living. In the show, the Harpy is not only laughably incompetent in its resistance, but also Daenerys and by extension Mosador unreasonable in their wish for justice because just one guy was murdered, rather than horrific murders and mutilation happening every night ever since Dany took the city. Rather than to follow this extremely simple plotline, the show invents the whole subplot with Rabbit Dog Mosador, so that Daenerys can be made incompetent and foolish for executing him. And all because she followed the advice of Barristan. At that point, I have no idea what the show wants to say. Dany should establish the ICC so that the murderer of White Rat can be tried. Else she's a mad queen. Mosador murders the son of the Harpy, hence he is a rabid dog, but Daenerys executing him is also bad and a politically stupid decision, which makes her no better than the Masters of Meereen, as will become evident when that pretty graffiti is gonna get a new edition, so what should have been done here? Are the slaves unreasonable for wanting their tormentors punished, or is Daenerys unreasonable for not giving in to the mass violence? See, if George puts Daenerys in unwinnable situations, he does it very skillfully, but here, this convoluted plot serves no purpose other than cheaply raising the stakes. Dany's incompetence is artificially placed there by the showrunners because they made their, in the best case scenario, disinterest in her plain in season 1 already. And even in that they fall, because this entire situation never should have happened. This guy shouldn't just be lurking in the Narnia entrance for Dario to conveniently find him alongside his Harpy mask and weapons. Barristan shouldn't have suggested the whole anachronistic fair trial. Mosador shouldn't have been able to just waltz into the cell and kill the man. And Dany shouldn't have decided to execute him publicly, and yet... Confederacy show. This is Mosador in the books. When she returned to her rooms atop the pyramid, she found Missandei crying softly on her pallet, trying as best she could to muffle the sounds of her sobs. "Come sleep with me," she told the little scribe. "Dawn will not come for hours yet." "Your Grace is kind to this one." Missandei slipped under the sheets. "He was a good brother." Then he wrapped her arms about the girl. "Tell me of him." "He taught me how to climb a tree when we were little. He could catch fish with his hands. Once I found him sleeping in our garden with 100 butterflies crawling over him. He looked so beautiful that morning. This one, I loved him. As he loved you." Then he stroked the girl's hair. "Say the word, my sweet, and I will send you from this awful place. I will find a ship somehow and send you home. To Nav. I would sooner stay with you. On Nav I would be afraid. What if the slavers came again? I feel safe when I'm with you." Safe. The word made Dany's eyes fill up with tears. "I want to keep you safe." Missandei was only a child. With her, she felt as if she could be a child too. "No one ever kept me safe when I was little. Well, Sir William did, but then he died, and Viserys... I want to protect you, but it is so hard. To be strong. I don't always know what I should do. I must know, though. I am all they have. I am the queen. The mother," whispered Missandei. "Mother to dragons," Dany shivered. "No. Mother to us all." Missandei hugged her tighter. "Your Grace should sleep. Dawn will be here soon, and Court. We'll both sleep, and dream of sweeter days. Close your eyes." When she did, Dany kissed her eyelids and made her giggle. In the last installment of the book versus show Dany series, I am not even angry or frustrated anymore. I am simply disappointed. Of course, Mosador cannot be made Missandei's brother, as she admitted in season 3 that she doesn't have a living family anymore. But why did she admit that? By the time season 3 was in production, all of the books were already out, and Villeneuve and Weiss allegedly read them. So why was Mossador removed? Why was this beautiful scene of Daenerys comforting Missandei removed? And why couldn't it be substituted by something else, even with Show Missandei not having a family? Say the sons of the Harpy murder a father, and Daenerys descends the steps to console his children and wife. It's that easy. It's lying on the ground, just take it. I mean, I know why it wasn't written. The show has been committed to making Dany stoic, emotionless and cold, and they cannot afford to show why she is actually called Misa, why she is a mother, why she is even in Meereen in the first place, because they think that the Iron Throne is her singular ambition in life, and all this arc is just a bus stop. And I wouldn't necessarily give a fuck because, yes, adaptation is adaptation, books are the books, but the problem is, nobody in earnest separates these. The show is revered as the true canon to this very day. To this day I hear that in the books Dany killed his that in the books the freedmen also spray graffiti saying Misa is a master, that in the books the freedmen also hate Dany and riot against her. If you hate this storyline so much, then just don't adapt it at this point. Skip it, like you skipped Bran in season 5. Or at least try to write something engaging, because the Mossador subplot requires that everyone involved seems lobotomized. Here's another passage that the show could have easily included. Kisses came easier than sleep, however. Dany shut her eyes and tried to think of home, of Dragonstone and King's Landing, and all the other places that Viserys had told her of, in a kinder land than this, but her thoughts kept returning back to Slaver's Bay, like ships caught in some bitter wind. When Missandei was sound asleep, Dany slipped from her arms and stepped out into the pre-dawn air to lean upon the cool brick parapet and gaze out across the city. 1,000 roofs stretched out below her, painted in shades of ivory and silver by the moon. Somewhere beneath these roofs, the sons of the Harpy were gathered, plotting ways to kill her and all those who loved her and put her children back in chains. Somewhere down there, a hungry child was crying for milk. Somewhere, an old woman lay dying. Somewhere, a man and maid embraced and fumbled at each other's clothes with eager hands. But up here, there was only the sheen of moonlight on pyramids and pits, with no hint what lay beneath. Up here there was only her, alone. She was the blood of the dragon. She could kill the sons of the Harpy, and the sons of the sons, and the sons of the sons of the sons. But the dragon could not feed a hungry child, nor help a dying woman's pain. And who would ever dare to love a dragon? Natalie Emmanuel does not have a speaking role in this episode. Why not have her stay with Dany, even with Mossador out of the picture? Why can't Dany confide in someone the show wants us to believe is her best friend? How beautiful and touching would it be to hear Daenerys say, I am a dragon, but a dragon cannot feed a hungry child. A dragon cannot bring prosperity to the slaves. A dragon cannot solve the mess we are in. And besides, no one would ever dare to love a dragon. Does show Daenerys even have any sort of internal reflections on herself, her life, her role, that she could externalize in any way? Or are beautiful monologues only reserved for male characters, while she is only allowed to stare off into the distance, as men around her put a leash on her? Let's briefly return to the issue of the murdered freedmen. Have any of the murderers been captured? Your servants have arrested the owner of the wine shop and his daughters. They plead their ignorance and beg for mercy. They all plead ignorance and beg for mercy. Give them to the shave pate. Skahas, keep each apart from the others and put them to question. It will be done, your worship. Would you have me question them sweetly or sharply? Sweetly to begin. Hear what tales they tell and what names they give you. It may be they had no part in this. She hesitated. 9, the noble Reznak said. Who else? 3 freedmen, murdered in their homes. The shave pate said. A moneylender, a cobbler, and the harpist Rilonari. They cut her fingers off before they killed her. The queen flinched. Rilonari had played the harp as sweetly as the maiden. When she had been a slave in Yunkai, she had played for every highborn family in the city. In Meereen she had become a leader amongst the Yunkish freedmen, their voice in Dany's councils. We have no captives but this wine cellar. None this one grieves to confess. We beg your pardon. Mercy, thought Dany. They will have the dragon's mercy. Skahas, I have changed my mind. Question the men sharply. I could. Or I could question the daughters sharply. Will is the father's loose on? That will wring some names from him. Do as you think best, but bring me names. Her fury was a fire in her belly. I will have no more unsullied slaughtered. Grey Worm, pull your men back to their barracks. Henceforth, let them guard my walls and gates and person. From this day it shall be for Myrinis to keep the peace in Myrine. Skahas, make me a new watch, made up in equal parts of shave-paids and freedmen. As you command. How many men? As many as you require. Reznak gasped. Magnificence! Where is the coin to come from, to pay wages for so many men? From the pyramids. Call it a blood tax. I will have 100 pieces of gold from every pyramid for each freedman that the Harpy's sons have slain. That brought a smile to the shave-paid's face. It will be done, he said. I will have 2 children from each of them, from the other pyramids as well, a boy and a girl. Hostages, said Skahas happily. Pages and cupbearers. If the great masters make objection, explain to them that, in Westeros, it is a great honor for a child to be chosen to serve at court. She left the rest unspoken. Go and do as I've commanded. I have my debt to mourn. You won't conflict? Here it is, Danny Antai's favorite. If you so badly want Barristan to object to the Mad Queen in the making, have him object to the sharp questioning and to the hostages. Still anachronistic, but it's that simple. The solutions lay on the ground, but the issue is, the writers do not write a story anymore. They write scenes, and bend the world and the characters to fit those scenes. Quaif, who never had a single conversation with Daenerys in the show, appears in the book once more. Missandei, she called. Iri, Jikwi. They sleep, came the answer. A woman stood under the permison tree, clad in a hooded robe that brushed the grass. Beneath the hood, her face seemed hard and shiny. She is wearing a mask, Dany knew. A wooden mask, finished in dark red lacquer. Quaif, am I dreaming? She pinched her ear and winced at the pain. I dreamt of you on Balerion, when first we came to Astapor. You did not dream, then or now. What are you doing here? How did you get past my guards? I came another way. Your guards never saw me. If I call out, they will kill you. They will swear to you that I am not here. Are you here? No. Hear me, Daenerys Targaryen. The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others. Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mammer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed Seneschal. Reznak, why should I fear him? Nanny rose from the pool. Water trickled down her legs, and gooseflesh covered her arms in the cool night air. If you have some warning from me, speak plainly. What do you want of me, Quaif? Moonlight shone in the woman's eyes. To show you the way. I remember the way. I go north to go south, east to go west, back to go forward, and to touch the light I have to pass beneath the shadow. She squeezed the water from her silvery hair. I am half seeing of riddling. In Carve I was a beggar, but here I am a queen. I command you, Daenerys. Remember the Undying. Remember who you are. The blood of the dragon. But my dragons are roaring in the darkness. I remember the Undying. Child of 3, they called me. 3 mounts they promised me. 3 fires and 3 treasons. 1 for blood, and 1 for gold, and 1 for... I suppose there is no need for these warnings. The glass candles are not burning. The pale mare never comes, nor does the Kraken and Dark Flame. A lion comes, but not the Griffin, not the Sun's Son, not the Mammer's Dragon. We don't even have the perfumed Seneschal. The title of the episode, Sons of the Harpy, would imply that we may finally learn something about these sons. Maybe get to know some of the masters. Maybe it's time to finally introduce the Harpy herself. No, of course not, and the Sons of the Harpy appear at the very end of the episode. The first Dany scene we get I like a lot. Daenerys and Barristan casually talk about Rhaegar, and Daenerys even smiles, which should count as a big victory since this may be the 3rd, 4th time when she's allowed to smile in the show. But this scene isn't here to throw us crumbs of Dany's book characterization or to finally give us some much needed Rhaegar exposition. It's here so that Barristan's death later this episode hits that much harder. Barristan leaves Dany and this is the last time she sees him. She goes to the audience chamber to once more listen to Hizdar's yapping about the fighting pits. Once more, for Show Hizdar, this is a matter of cultural preservation and not a money grab. Show Hizdar even claims that this may be the only thing that would bring the former slaves and former masters together, as supposedly everyone loves these fights. Now, this made me realize something. The central conflict in Show Myrine wasn't the butchery done by the Sons of the Harpy, nor the exploration of how much Dany is willing to compromise for the illusion of peace, nor about Aragorn's tax policy. The central conflict in Show Meereen are those fighting pits. As Hisdar and Dany talk about the most important thing in this storyline, Sons of the Harpy gather and slaughter people I assume are the freedmen in what I assume is a brothel. And they do so in broad daylight, by the way. You know, maybe it's good that the Harpy herself was never adapted. I can't imagine the Green Grays leading a resistance movement this reckless and chaotic. As the Unsullied hear the screams, they rush to investigate and are cornered. It's sad to see such mind-blowing visuals be wasted on this idiocy, cause I have to say, I absolutely adore these masks. And I absolutely adore the soundtrack. I don't even mind the show version of the Tok'ra being so different. A fight in broad daylight ensues, and an alarm is raised, as Barristan goes to investigate. Grey Worm is heavily injured, but he will survive, don't worry. You know who won't survive? Yeah, I will let the actor speak his mind about what he thinks about this.
In a way, unfortunately, I'd read the books. So I had expectations for season 5, and as soon as I got the schedule, I thought, well, there's something up here, because I thought I'd be doing more weeks, and in fact, I was doing less than normal. So immediately, I thought, well, they must be writing me out.
But usually, people are quite gracious about it and everything. And this year, for the first time, we got some pushback where the actor said, "You sure about that?"
Guess who it is?
Did you have words? Did you say anything to them?
Well, I did ask and give an argument why I thought Barristan should stay. But at the end of the day, Dan and David, they'd worked out what they wanted to do.
Yeah, so there was a long conversation, then we got a long letter explaining why this was a bad idea. Which just made us want to kill that person that much more. So,
If I'm honest, I was a bit dischuffed by that, because I felt that I should have known. It wouldn't have made any difference, but I felt as a matter of just courtesy, I should have known beforehand.
But that seems about right, as there is no false peace in Meereen that Barristan could break. It's all about those fighting pits after all. Hisdar is not a schemer, the Harpy is just not there. So the character of Barristan was utilized to do what these showrunners do best, making Daenerys into a rabid dog. But about that later. I don't have to say that none of this happened in the books, so what does happen in them? Well, Daenerys is visited by a character that cannot visit her in the show because he is dead. Olk Xanaxos. Their conversation is very amusing, but I will show you only the most crucial exchanges. Whence came this madness? Should I count myself fortunate that you did not free my own slaves when you were my guest in Karv? I was a beggar, and you were Xaro of the 13, Dany thought, and all you wanted were my dragons. Your slaves seem well treated and content. It was not till Astapor that my eyes were opened. Do you know how Unsullied are made and trained? Cruelly, I have no doubt. When a smith makes a sword, he thrusts the blade into the fire, beats on it with a hammer, then plunges it into iced water to temper the steel. If you would savor the sweet taste of the fruit, you must water the tree. How else to grow a soldier? Your Radiants enjoyed my dancers. Would it surprise you to know that they are slaves, bred and trained in Yunkai? They have been dancing since they were old enough to walk. How else to achieve such perfection? He took a swallow of his wine. They are expert in all the erotic arts as well. I had thought to make your grace a gift of them. By all means, and he was unsurprised. I shall free them. That meant he wins. And what would they do with freedom? As well give fish a suit of mail. They were made to dance. Made by who? Their masters? Perhaps your dancers would sooner build, or bake, or farm. Have you asked them? Perhaps your elephants would sooner be nightingales. Instead of sweet song, Meereen's nights would be filled with thunderous trumpetings, and your trees would shatter beneath the weight of great grey birds. Xaro excited. Daenerys, my delight, beneath that sweet young breast beats a tender heart, but take counsel from an older, wiser head. Things are not always as they seem. Much that may seem evil can be good. Consider rain. Rain. Does he take me for a fool or just a child? We curse the rain when it falls upon our heads, yet without it we should starve. The world needs rain. And slaves. You make a face, but it is true. Consider Karv. In art, music, magic, trade, all that makes us more than beasts, Karv sits above the rest of mankind, as you sit at the summit of this pyramid. But below, in place of bricks, the magnificence that is the queen of cities rests upon the backs of slaves. Ask yourself, if all men must grab in the dirt for food, how shall any man lift his eyes to contemplate the stars? If each of us must break his back to build a hovel, who shall raise the temples to glorify the gods? For some men to be great, others must be enslaved. He was too eloquent for her. Dani had no answer for him, only the raw feeling in her belly. Slavery is not the same as rain, she insisted. I have been rained on, and I have been sold. It is not the same. No man wants to be owned. This shows how taking creative liberties in the adaptation needs to be carefully considered. The show had Dani lock Xaro and Borja in an empty vault, whereas in the books she was forced to flee Karcz in fear of her life. All to make her seem more evil and unhinged, I do not doubt, but that means that the situation in Essos is much less complicated. See, it is not just in Slaver's Bay that the slave masters sharpen their knives against Dani. Basically, all of Essos prepares to go to war against her, meaning that even maintaining the false peace in Meereen would not do anything in the long run. The reason why Xaro is in Meereen is simple. He gives Dani an ultimatum. At first, he of course tries to reason with her, to convince her that slavery is as natural as rain and necessary for the world to function. We know that this is not true. Slavery is and has never been necessary. So it's all that downing that Ezoya fans, who most certainly do not come from slave-based societies, are so quick to defend this point of view and cry about the ruined economy. Then he tempts her with the possibility of returning home. Tell me true, my friend. Why did you seek me out if not to trade? To bring a gift for the queen of my heart. Say on. What trap is this now? The gift you begged of me in Karcz. Ships. There are 13 galleys in the bay. Yours if you will have them. I have brought you a fleet to carry you home to Westeros. A fleet? It was more than she could hope for, so of course it made her worry. In Karcz, Xaro had offered her 30 ships for a dragon. And what price do you ask for these ships? None. I no longer lust for dragons. I saw their work at Astapor on my way here, when my silken cloud put in for water. The ships are yours, sweet queen. 13 galleys, and men to pull the oars. 13. To be sure, Xaro was one of the 13. No doubt he had convinced each of his fellow members to give up one ship. She knew the merchant prince too well to think that he would sacrifice 13 of his own ships. I must consider this. May I inspect these ships? We have grown suspicious, Daenerys. Always. I have grown wise, Xaro. Inspect all you wish. When you are satisfied, swear to me that you shall return to Westeros forthwith, and the ships are yours. Swear by your dragons and your seven-faced god, and the ashes of your fathers, and go. And if I should decide to wait a year, or 3, a mournful look crossed Xaro's face. That would make me very sad, my sweet delight, for young and strong as you now seem, you shall not live so long. Not here. He offers the honeycomb with one hand, and shows the whip with the other. The Yunkai are not so fearsome as all that. Not all of your enemies are in the Yellow City. Beware men with cold hearts and blue lips. You had not come gone from Karcz a fortnight when Piatri set out with 3 of his fellow warlocks to seek for you in Pentos. Dani was more amused than afraid. It is good I turned aside then. Pentos is half the word from Meereen. This is so, he allowed. Yet soon or late word must reach them of the Dragon Queen of Slaver's Bay. Is that meant to frighten me? I lived in fear for 14 years, my lord. I woke afraid each morning, and went to sleep afraid each night. But my fears were burned away the day I came forth from the fire. Only one thing frightens me now. See, now he is outright making threats and Dani knows it. The temptation to take these ships and return home is there, however. Your Grace, with these ships we might be home before year's end. Dani had never known a home. In Braavos there had been a house with a red door, but that was all. Beware of Carthin bearing gifts, especially merchants of the 13. There is some trap here. Perhaps these ships are rotten, or, if they were so unseaworthy, they would not have crossed the sea from Karcz, Sir Barristan pointed out. But your Grace was wise to insist upon inspection. I will take Admiral Gorleo to the galleys at first light, with his captains and 2 score of his sailors. We can crawl over every inch of those ships. It was good counsel. Yes, make it so. Westeros. Home. But if she left, what would happen to her city? Meereen was never your city. Her brother's voice seemed to whisper. Your cities are across the sea. your 7 kingdoms where your enemies await you. You were born to serve them blood and fire. We returned to the house with the red door and Daenerys longing for a place she could call her home. That doesn't matter as show Daenerys very clearly does not consider Westeros a potential home, but a birthright, meaning that her entire tenure in Meereen is just pointless filler. And since she is not fighting for the false peace, the plotline gets reduced to the fighting pits problem. The fall of Astapor also seems to have been cut from the show. As ever, Lord Gael was the first to present himself, looking even more wretched than usual. Your Radiance, he moaned, as he fell to the marble at her feet. The armies of the Yunkai descend on Astapor. I beg you, come south with all your strength. I warned your king that this war of his was folly, Dany reminded him. He would not listen. Great Cleon sought only to strike down to the vile slavers of Yunkai. Great Cleon is a slaver himself. I know that the Mother of Dragons will not abandon us in our hour of peril. Lend us your unsullied to defend our walls. And if I do, who will defend my walls? Many of my freedmen were slaves in Astapor. Perhaps some will wish to help defend your king. That is their choice as free men. I gave Astapor freedom. It is up to you to defend it. We are all dead then. You gave us death, not freedom. Gael leapt to his feet and spat into her face. Strong Belvas seized him by the shoulder and slammed him down onto the marble, so hard that Dany heard Gael's teeth crack. The shave blade would have done worse, but she stopped him. Enough, she said, dabbing at her cheek with the end of her tokar. No one has ever died from spittle. Take him away. I wonder how the Mad King would have reacted if someone spat on him. Surely he would just shrug it off. But we can't have this inclusion in the show. We can't have anyone physically attack Dany and her not give a damn. Because the show already made sure to sneakily mention the possibility that we watch a Mad Queen in the making. The ships get inspected and Dany discusses the possibility of leaving the city, but ultimately is forced to abandon this hope, human heart in conflict with itself at its strongest. Those left behind in Meereen would envy them their easy deaths, moaned Resnach. They will make slaves of us, or throw us in the pits. All will be as it was, or worse. Where is your courage? Sir Barristan lashed out. Her Grace freed you from your chains. It is for you to sharpen your swords and defend your own freedom when she leaves. Brave words, from one who means to sail into the sunset. Simon Strybeck snarled back. Will you look back at our dying? Your Grace, magnificence, your worship, enough! Then they slapped the table. No one will be left to die. You are all my people. Her dreams of home and love had blinded her. I will not abandon Meereen to the fate of Astapor. It grieves me to say so, but Westeros must wait. Groleo was aghast. We must accept these ships. If we refuse this gift, Sir Barristan went to one knee before her. My queen, your realm has need of you. You are not wanted here. On in Westeros, men will flock to your banners by the thousands, great lords and noble knights. She is come, they will shout to one another, in glad voices. Prince Rhaegar's sister has come home at last. If they love me so much, they will wait for me. Dany stood. Resnach, summon Xeroxan Daxos. And Daenerys steadily chooses duty over personal desires, as she always does, and notice how she does not expect to be welcomed in Westeros with open arms either. But the showrunners never present her with that choice. The choice is, once more, will you open these fighting pits or not? And the choice of duty over ambition puts her in an unwinnable situation, the one the showrunners tried to write for her with Mossador. Tears welled from his eyes, creeping down his nose, past emeralds, amethysts, and black diamonds. I told the 13 that you would heed my wisdom. It grieves me to learn that I was wrong. Take these ships and sail away, or you will surely die screaming. You cannot know how many enemies you have made. I know one stands before me now, weeping numerous tears. The realization made her sad. When I went to the Hall of 1,000 Thrones to beg the Pureborn for your life, I said that you were no more than a child, Zara went on. But Aegon Emeros the Exquisite rose and said, she is a foolish child, mad and heedless and too dangerous to live. When your dragons were small, they were a wonder. Grown, they are death and devastation, a flaming sword above the world. He wiped away the tears. I should have slain you in Carth. I was a guest beneath your roof, and ate of your meat and mead, she said. In memory of all you did for me, I will forgive those words. Once, but never presume to threaten me again. Xeroxan Daxos does not threaten. He promises. Her sadness turned to fury. And I promise you that if you are not gone before the sun comes up, we will learn how well a liar's tears can quench dragonfire. Leave me, Xaro, quickly." He went, but left his word behind. Dany seated herself upon her bench, again, to gaze across the blue silk sea, towards distant Westeros. One day, she promised herself. The next morning, Xaro's Gallias was gone, but the gift that he had brought her remained behind in Slaver's Bay. Long red streamers flew from the masts of the 13 Cartling galleys, breathing in the wind. And when Daenerys descended to hold court, a messenger from the ships awaited her. He spoke no word, but laid at her feet a black satin pillow, upon which rested a single blood-stained glove. "What is this?" Skahas demanded. "A bloody glove means war," said the queen. So Daenerys now also has Karth against her, and Karth is never mentioned in this show ever again, nor are the other slave cities for the matter, as slavery isn't reserved to Slaver's Bay either. And to be perfectly honest, I have a rather convincing piece of evidence that the showrunners did consider Daenerys making a stop in Volantis, something she will most likely do in the Winds of Winter. For Blu-ray releases, HBO would add short histories and lore featurettes that explain certain aspects of the story in more detail. For Season 5, one of those featurettes explained the history of Volantis, and ended with this rather interesting line.
But one must wonder how much longer such freedoms will endure, when across Essos one hears the sound of chains breaking, of slaves rising, of dragons roaring. Volantis may call itself the first daughter of Valyria, but it is not the last.
There's also another pattern that I found myself finding in how Daenerys was adapted on screen. How the men who prey on her or want her dead are made her victims in the show. We already discussed the Predator Jorah becoming a good, devoted, just man that the Colossus Bitch rejects. But that becomes sinister when we look at Xaro and later Histar. In the book, Xaro explicitly tells Dany that he wants her dead, but in the show, he is a victim of the cruel and ruthless Mad Queen. Isn't that interesting? By the way, don't you guys think that the slaver of the pureborn, Aegon Emeros the Exquisite, speaks like a seasoned Dany anti? Foolish child, mad, heedless, and too dangerous to live. Let's laugh. Now, let's move on to one Histar Zolor arc. Kill the Boy opens with Daenerys grieving the slain Barristan. His character served no purpose whatsoever. He had no character development or anything of this sort. He was orbiting around Dany until it was time to die for shock value, to stick it back at the actor. After all, there's no false peace in Mirian Barristan could break. If you cut his character, absolutely nothing of significance would have changed. Histar comes to say his condolences. Daria suggests throughout researching Mirian to find any remaining sons of the Harpy, but Daenerys says that she prefers to round up all of the leaders of Mirian in the Great Pyramid. Histar is also arrested, and the leaders of the Mirinis families, of whom we know exactly one, Histar, are brought to the catacombs where Rhaegal and Viserion are chained. The allegedly worst actress in the show fully improvised what Daenerys says in this scene out of her knowledge of High Valyrian, as the scene was originally written in English. Two masters are burned and eaten by Rhaegal and Viserion. Daenerys circles Histar as if she were a predator watching her prey, and Histar seems to be the only one standing his ground. But he and the rest of the masters are spared. The Mad Queen in the making, however, backtracks from this. Missandei, an unambiguous former slave, tells Dany that she gave the masters what they deserve. But Dany says that she can't just round everyone up and kill them because then she would rule over nobody. Daenerys finally asks Missandei for advice. Long overdue, as Dany relies on her 11-year-old's wisdom and intelligence already in a storm of swords. Missandei tells Dany that she values that Dany listens to her counselors and learns into their experience when her own is lacking, something the Mad Queens certainly always do, right? But also ignore the counselors when she knows there is a better choice. Essentially, what Missandei says is that Dany has good gut instincts. Daenerys then goes to the imprisoned Histar, admits her mistake, and announces that he was right about tradition and that she will reopen the fighting pits and that they will marry. In case you were doubtful about my previous assertions about the central conflict of Show Mirian's storyline, here is your proof. This entire storyline really is about the fighting pits. It just so happens that in the same episode, the Night's Watch receives a letter detailing Dany's struggle, and Sam reads it to Maester Aemon. We get the Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing line as Jon walks in, the most unsubtle piece of foreshadowing I've ever seen, and Aemon delivers the kill the boy monologue to him. Why do I mention this? Because the show already creates a double standard for how Dany and Jon are treated. Jon gets to kill the boy and let a man be born. Daenerys is never given the same death. It's not kill a girl and let a woman be born. It's first the Mad Queen came for the slavers and I did not speak out. In a vacuum, this scene of Dany feeding 2 slave masters to her dragons is not wrong at face value, at least as long as we forget Tyrion's invocation of Nimuller in Season 8. Especially because I think she should have been doing this all along. Though personally, as a ruthless pragmatist myself, I would just hang them all, unless they're willing to go through 10 years of re-education, through harsh labor, like the last emperor of China. But this singular scene also undercut the entire theme of Dany's storyline in the books. I said that the act of Dany chaining her dragons in the darkness in Season 4 would be undercut in Season 5, and this is what I meant. Why chain these dragons if you're gonna throw people into their jaws at first opportunity? I don't have to say that none of this happened in the books, right? Book Daenerys would never have done this. In fact, in spite of what most people claim, Dany doesn't use her dragons to execute people left and right. But certainly you will get this impression if you let show Daenerys completely overtake your perception of book Daenerys. The whole reason why I make this long video series. To prove that most, if not all of the talking points about Daenerys circulating in the fandom are the result of people not putting firm lines between 2 versions of the character. Because the whole point of Dany's tenure in Meereen is that she does want to compromise. She wants the peace. She does not want to throw people to her dragons to solve her problems because she fears what they are capable of. Mother of dragons, Daenerys thought. Mother of monsters. What have I unleashed upon the world? A queen I am, but my throne is made of burnt bones, and it rests on quicksand. Without dragons, how could she hope to hold Meereen, much less win back Westeros? I am the blood of the dragon, she thought. If they are monsters, so am I. This is what I mean when I say that there is no actual conflict in Meereen beyond the fighting pits, because Show Daenerys was never willing to seek out that fragile peace. She was never willing to compromise. And, by the way, in the books, it's Daario who wants to round everyone up, to which Dany is appalled. He had been so long away, Dany had almost forgotten what he was. Sellswords were treacherous by nature, she reminded herself. Fickle, faithless, brutal. He will never be more than he is. He will never be the staff of kings. The pyramids are strong, she explained to him. We could take them only at great cost. The moment we attack one, the others will rise against us. Then winkle them out of their pyramids on some pretext. A wedding might serve. Why not? Promise your hand to Hisdar, and all the great masters will come to see you married. When they gather in the Temple of the Graces, turn us loose upon them. Dany was appalled. He is a monster. A gallant monster, but a monster still. Do you take me for the Butcher King? Better the butcher than the meat. All kings are butchers. Are queens so different? This queen is. Daario shrugged. Most queens have no purpose but to warm some king's bed and pop out sons for him. If that's the sort of queen you mean to be, best marry Hisdar. Her anger flashed. Have you forgotten who I am? No. Have you? Viserys would have his head off for that insolence. I am the blood of the dragon. Do not presume to teach me lessons. When Dany stood, the lion pelt slipped from her shoulders and tumbled to the ground. Leave me. Daario gave her a sweeping bow. I live to obey. In the show, however, Dany is the one made more ruthless than him. Now back to Hisdar. I have to admit something. I have something of a strange fondness for his book counterpart. I of course know that he is a despicable, power-hungry slaver who hides his cruelty behind a veneer of charm and courtesy. I know he hurts Daenerys, but I consider him a compelling character nonetheless. I have similar feelings for Roose Bolton for the matter. Let's call him my problematic fave. How I wish this is the Hisdar we got in the show. I know Joel would have killed it, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. I promise we will return to Hisdar in a second, but before we do that, I need to admit to another problematic fave. Galaza Galare. I have already said that the Sons of the Harpy are, in the show's version of events, a laughably incompetent plot device, as opposed to a highly organized, strategic, and rather successful resistance movement from the books. And that boils down to the fact that the Harpy herself was cut from the show. Who is Galaza Galare, the Green Grace? She is the high priestess in a Giscari religion who resides in the Temple of the Graces. We don't know a lot about the religion aside from the fact that it is polytheistic and there are several graces that serve different roles. The blue graces are healers, the red graces offer sexual favors, white graces are novices, pink graces likely attend the high priestess, and there are also gold and purple graces that serve unknown roles. But it seems like there is only one green grace, and she is the high priestess of the religion, something of a high septon. The green grace, Galaza Galare, is mentioned as early as A Dance with Dragons Daenerys I. The mother of dragons must don the tokar, or be forever hated, warned the green grace, Galaza Galare. In the walls of Westeros, or a gown of Mirish lace, your radiance shall forever remain a stranger amongst us, a grotesque outlander, a barbarian conqueror. Myreen's queen must be a lady of old guess. She is periodically mentioned in Dany's internal monologue as well. Reznak and the Green Grace had been urging Dany to take a Myreenese noble for her husband to reconcile the city to her rule. His Dar Zolorak might be worth a careful look. Sooner him than Skahas. The Shavepate had offered to set aside his wife for her, but the notion made her shudder. Hisder at least knew how to smile. Grazdan, she had been forewarned, was a cousin of the Green Grace, whose support she had found invaluable. The priestess was a voice for peace, acceptance, and obedience to lawful authority. I can give her cousin a respectful hearing, whatever he desires. Dany grimaced. Even her own people would give no rest about the matter. Reznak Moreznak stressed the coin to be made through taxes. The Green Grace said that reopening the pits would please the gods. The Shavepate felt it would win her support against the Sons of the Harpy. Once the trees had gone, the soul baked beneath the hot sun and blew away in thick red clouds. It was these calamities that transformed my people into slavers, Galaza Galare had told her at the Temple of the Graces. And I am the calamity that will change these slavers back into people, Dany had sworn to herself. I don't remember if this is mentioned anywhere explicitly, but it seems like Galaza is Dany's council member, and she advises her on various matters. Overall, she makes a good impression. She is like a mother figure to Dany, ready to guide her out of the goodness of her heart. Except Galaza Galare is the Harpy. How? The Sons of the Harpy have put down their knives, but why? Because the noble Hisder asked sweetly? He is one of them, I tell you. That's why they obey him. He might well be the Harpy. If there is a Harpy. Skahas was convinced that somewhere in Myreen, the Sons of the Harpy had a highborn overlord, a secret general commanding an army of shadows. Dany did not share this belief. Now, I know full well that it has not been explicitly confirmed that Galaza Galare is the Harpy, and Dany even questions whether there is a single resistance leader she could blame for all of her problems. But out of all the possible candidates, assuming that the Harpy exists of course, Galaza makes the most sense. Recall, if you will, the issue of the Weavers that once belonged to Grazdanzo Galare, a cousin of the Green Grace. Dany refused to compensate him, and what happens later? Galaza Galare sipped her wine, but her eyes did not leave Dany. Storms rage within the walls, as well as without. More freedmen died last night, or so I have been told. 3. Saying it left a bitter taste in her mouth. The cowards broke in on some weavers, freed women who had done no harm to anyone. All they did was make beautiful things. I have a tapestry they gave me, hanging over my bed. The Sons of the Harpy broke their loom, and raped them, before slitting their throats. Thus, she has a motive, and she has the means and tools to lead a resistance movement. As a high priestess of the Giscari religion, she has power and authority to lead and organize. The Harpies are female, and the mother of dragons goes against the mother of Harpies, who call themselves her sons. Thus, we have two mothers going against each other. Mother to the freedmen, mother of dragons, and mother to the slavers, the mother Harpy. Remember these child hostages Dany took? 2 of them are the Green Grace's own family. 2 of Dany's favorite hostages served the food and kept the cups filled. A doe-eyed little girl called Keza and a skinny boy named Grashar. They were brother and sister and cousins of the Green Grace, who greeted them with kisses when she swept in, and asked them if they had been good. They are very sweet, the both of them, Dany assured her. Keza sings for me sometimes. She has a lovely voice, and Sir Barristan has been instructing Grashar and the other boys in the ways of Western chivalry. They are of my blood, the Green Grace said. as Keza filled her cup with a dark red wine. "It is good to know they have pleased your radiance. I hope I may do likewise." The old woman's hair was white, and her skin was parchment thin, but the years had not dimmed her eyes. They were as green as her robes, sad eyes, full of wisdom. "You can see that these hostages are alive and well, in spite of Dany promising that she will retaliate on them for the murders of the freedmen. Galaza also notes this. This we have heard, and yet your radiance has found the courage to answer battery with mercy. You have not harmed any of the noble children you hold as hostage. Not as yet, no." Dany had grown fond of her young charges. Some were shy, and some were bold. Some were sweet, and some were sullen. But all were innocent. "If I kill my cupbearers, who will pour my wine and serve me supper?" she said, trying to make light of it. The priestess did not smile. "The shave pate would have fed them to your dragons, it is said. A life for a life. For every brazen beast cut down, he would have a child die." Dany pushed the food about her plate. She dared not glance over to where Grazdar and Keza stood, for fear that she might cry. "The shave pate has a harder heart than mine." They had fought about the hostages half a dozen times. "The sons of the Harpy are laughing in their pyramids," Skahas said, just this morning. "What good are hostages if you will not take their heads?" In his eyes, she was only a weak woman. Hazea was enough. What good is peace if it must be purchased with the blood of little children? "These murders are not their doing," Dany told the Green Grace feebly. "I am no Watcher Queen, and for that Nirin gives thanks," said Galaza Galare. I can recall a certain other character who himself does not have qualms about the prospect of executing child hostages. This is crucial and an antithesis to Daenerys in the show. Daenerys just kills these slave masters left and right, and the whole child hostages subplot was dropped. Some may say it was done to make Daenerys seem better in the show, but I think the opposite. This was dropped to not show that Dany is, at her core, merciful and forgiving, and she does not want to stain her hands with the blood of innocents. Galaza wants Dany to take a Myrinis for her husband, and it's during this conversation when the deal is basically sealed. We have heard that the Butcher King of Astapor is dead, slain by his own soldiers when he commanded them to march out and attack the Yunkai. The words were bitter in her mouth. He was hardly cold before another took his place, calling himself Cleon II. That one lasted 8 days before his throat was opened. Then his killer claimed the crown. So did the first Cleon's concubine, King Cutthroat and Queen Whore, the Astapori called them. Their followers are fighting battles in the streets, while the Yunkai and their sellswords wait outside the walls. These are grievous times. Your Radiance, may I presume to offer you my counsel? You know how much I value your wisdom. Then heed me now and marry. Dany had been expecting this. Oftentimes I have heard you say that you are only a young girl. To look at you, you still seem half a child, too young and frail to face such trials by yourself. You need a king beside you to help you bear these burdens. Dany speared a chunk of lamb, took a bite from it, chewed slowly. Tell me, can this king puff his cheeks up and blow Xaros galleys back to carve? Can he clap his hands and break the siege of Astapor? Can he put food in the bellies of my children and bring peace back to my streets? Can you? The Green Grace asked. A king is not a god, but there is still much that a strong man might do. When my people look at you, they see a conqueror from across the seas, come to murder us and make slaves of our children. A king could change that. A highborn king of pure Giscari blood could reconcile the city to your rule. Elsewise, I fear, your reign must end as it began, in blood and fire. And he pushed her foot about her plate. And who would the gods of Gis have me take as my king and consort? Hisdar Zolorak, Galaza Galare said firmly. Dany did not trouble to find surprise. Why Hisdar? Skahas is noble-born as well. Skahas is a Kandak, Hisdar Lorak. Your Radiance will forgive me, but only one who is not herself Giscari would not understand the difference. Oft have I heard that yours is the blood of Aegon the Conqueror, Jaehaerys the Wise, and Daeron the Dragon. The noble Hisdar is of the blood of Mazdan the Magnificent, Hazrak the Handsome, and Zakas the Liberator. His forebearers are as dead as mine. Will Hisdar raise their shades to defend Meereen against its enemies? I need a man with ships and swords. You offer me ancestors. We are an old people. Ancestors are important to us. Wed Hisdar Zolorak and make a son with him, a son whose father is the Harpy, whose mother is the dragon. In him the prophecies shall be fulfilled, and your enemies will melt away like snow. He shall be the stallion that mounts the world. Dany knew how it went with prophecies. They were made of words, and words were wind. There would be no son for Lorak, no heir to unite dragon and Harpy. When the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the seas go dry and mountains blown in the wind like leaves, only then would her womb quicken once again. But Daenerys Targaryen had other children, tens of thousands, who had hailed her as their mother when she broke their chains. She thought of stalwart Shield, of Missandei's brother, of the woman Rilonari, who had played the harp so beautifully. No marriage would ever bring them back to life, but if a husband could help end the slaughter, then she owed it to her dead to marry. If I wed Hisdar, will that turn Skahas against me? She trusted Skahas more than she trusted Hisdar, but the Shave-Pate would be a disaster as a king. He was too quick to anger, too slow to forgive. She saw no gain in wedding a man as hated as herself. Hisdar was well respected, as far as she could see. "What does my prospective husband think of this?" she asked the Green Grace. "What does he think of me?" "Your Grace need only ask him. The noble Hisdar awaits below. Send down to him, if that is your pleasure." "You presume too much, priestess," the queen thought, but she swallowed her anger and made herself smile. "Why not?" She sent for Sir Barristan and told the old knight to bring Hisdar to her. "It is a long climb. Have the Unsullied help him up." Do you see the stark difference? In the books, Daenerys is forced to marry someone she doesn't love. In the show, she demands that Hisdar marry her at what is essentially a gunpoint. Human heart in conflict with itself be damned. Dany loves Dario and dislikes Hisdar, and she is the one forced to marry him, not the other way around. But once more, she puts duty above her desires, because a queen belongs to her people, not to herself. And so enters my problematic fave. And as you will soon see, Dany doesn't just accept his offer at face value. She wants to test him first. When she was gone, Dany let Keza fill her cup again, dismissed the children, and commanded that Hisdar Zolorak be admitted to her presence. And if he dares say one word about his precious fighting pits, I might have him thrown off the terrace. Hisdar wore a plain green robe beneath a quilted vest. He bowed low when he entered, his face solemn. "Have you no smile for me?" Dany asked him. "Am I as fearful as all that?" "I always grown solemn in the presence of such beauty." It was a good start. "Drink with me." Dany filled his cup herself. "You know why you are here. The Green Grace seem to feel that if I take you for my husband, all my woes will vanish. I would never make so bold a claim. Men are born to strive and suffer. Our woes only vanish when we die. I can be of help to you, however. I have gold and friends and influence, and the blood of old geese flows in my veins. Though I have never wed, I have 2 natural children, a boy and a girl, so I can give you heirs. I can reconcile this city to your rule, and put an end to this nightly slaughter in the streets." "Can you?" Dany studied his eyes. "Why should the sons of the Harpy lay down their knives for you? Are you one of them?" "No." "Would you tell me if you were?" He laughed. "No." "The Shave-Pate has ways of finding the truth. I do not doubt that Skahas would soon have me confessing, and they with him, and I will be one of the Harpy's sons. 2 days, and I will be the Harpy. 3, and it will turn out I slew your father too, back in the Sunset Kingdoms, when I was yet a boy. Then he will impale me on a stake, and you can watch me die. But afterwards, the killings will go on." Hisdar leaned closer. "Or you can marry me, and let me try to stop them. Why would you want to help me? For the crown?" "A crown would suit me well, I will not deny that. It is more than that, however. Is it so strange that I would want to protect my own people, as you protect your freedmen? Meereen cannot endure another war, your radiance." That was a good answer, and an honest one. "I have never wanted war. I defeated the Yunkai once and spared their city, when I might have sacked it. I refused to join King Cleon when he marched against them. Even now, with Astapor besieged, I stay my hand. And Karth. I have never done the Karthin any harm. Not by intent, no, but Karth is a city of merchants, and they love the clink of silver coins, the gleam of yellow gold. When you smash the slave trade, the blow was felt from Westeros to Ashai. Karth depends upon its slaves. So to Tolos, Nugis, Lys, Tyrosh, Volantis. The list is long, my queen. Let them come. In me, they shall find a sterner foe than Cleon. I would sooner perish fighting than return my children to bondage. There may be another choice. The Yunkai can be persuaded to allow all your freedmen to remain free, I believe, if your worship will agree that the Yellow City might trade and train slaves unmolested from this day forth. No more blood need flow, save for the blood of those slaves that the Yunkai will trade and train." And I said, but she recognized the truth in his words even so. "It may be that is the best end we can hope for. You have not said you love me." "I will, if it would please your radiance." "That is not the answer of a man in love." "What is love? Desire? No man with all his parts could ever look on you and not desire you, Daenerys. This is not why I would marry you, however. Before you came, Meereen was dying. Our rulers were old men, with withered cocks and crones whose puckered cans were dry as dust. They sat atop their pyramids, sipping apricot wine and talking of the glories of the old empire, whilst the centuries slipped by and the very bricks of the city crumbled all around them. Custom and caution had an iron grip upon us till you awakened us with fire and blood. A new time has come, and new things are possible. Marry me. He is not hard to look at, Dany told herself, and has a king's tongue. Kiss me, she commanded. He took her hand again and kissed her fingers. Not that way. Kiss me as if I were your wife. Hisdar took her by the shoulders as tenderly as if she were a baby bird. Leaning forward, he pressed his lips to hers. His kiss was light and dry and quick. Dany felt no stirrings. Shall I kiss you again? He asked when it was over. No. On her terrace, in her bathing pool, the little fish would nibble at her legs as she sobbed. Even they kissed with more fervor than Hisdar's Zolorak. I do not love you. Hisdar shrugged. That might come in time. It has been known to happen that way. Not with us, she thought. Not whilst Dario is so close. It's him I want, not you. One day I will want to return to Westeros, to claim the 7 kingdoms that were my father's. One day all men must die, but it serves no good to dwell on death. I prefer to take each day as it comes. Dany folded her hands together. Words are wind, even words like love and peace. I put more trust in deeds. In my 7 kingdoms, knights go on quests to prove themselves worthy of the maiden they love. They seek for magic swords, for chests of gold, for crowns stolen from a dragon's hoard. Hisdar arched an eyebrow. The only dragons that I know are yours, and magic swords are even scarcer. I will gladly bring you rings and crowns and chests of gold, if that is your desire. Peace is my desire. You say that you can help me end the nightly slaughter in my streets. I say do it. Put an end to this shadow war, my lord. That is your quest. Give me 90 days and 90 nights without a murder, and I will know that you are worthy of a throne. Can you do that? Hisdar looked thoughtful. 90 days and 90 nights without a corpse. And on the 91st we wed. Perhaps, said Dany with a coy look. Though young girls have been known to be fickle, I might still want a magic sword. Hisdar laughed. Then you shall have that too, Radiance. Your wish is my command. Best tell your seneschal to begin preparations for our wedding. Nothing would please the noble Reznak more. If Miri knew that a wedding was in the offing, that alone might buy her a few nights' respite, even if Hisdar's efforts came to naught. The Shave Pate will not be happy with me, but Reznak will dance for joy. Dany did not know which of those concerned her more. She needed Skahas and the brazen beasts, and she had come to mistrust all of Reznak's counsel. Beware of the perfumed seneschal. Has Reznak made common cause with Hisdar and the Green Grace, and set some trap to snare me? And this counts as even more cut dialogue. The only thing allowed to Dany is stone-cold one-liners, all in the show that is supposed to be carried by the dialogue, by people talking in rooms. Also, there is another thing the show cut. After Dario returns from Lazar and suggests the Myrini's red wedding, Daenerys sends him away. When he was gone, Daenerys called Ser Barristan back. I want the Stormcrows back in the field. Your Grace. They have only now returned. I want them gone. Let them scout the Yunkish hinterlands, and give protection to any caravans coming over to the Kizai Pass. Henceforth Dario shall make his reports to you. Give him every honor that is due him, and see that his men are well paid. But on no account admit him to my presence. As you say, Your Grace. That night she could not sleep, but turned and twisted restlessly in her bed. She even went so far as to summon Iri, hoping her caresses might help ease her way to rest. But after a short while, she pushed the Dothraki girl away. Iri was sweet and soft and willing, but she was not Dario. What have I done? She thought, huddled in her empty bed. I have waited so long for him to come back, and I sent him away. He would make a monster of me, she whispered, a butcher queen. But then she thought of Drogon far away, and the dragons in the pit. There is blood on my hands too, and on my heart. We are not so different, Dario and I. We are both monsters. Dario is constantly by Dany's side in the show. In the books, she sends him away in fear of what he represents. And, once more, Dany's self-reflecting side is omitted. She believes that Dario is a bad influence for her, and that they are both monsters. So much for her trusting Dario unquestionably. Yet another mixture between the source material and the show. This episode opens with Dario and Daenerys once more being intimate and the former complaining about the prospect of his dad taking his place. Dario also insinuates that the Sons of the Harpy stopped their killings because their leader will be made king. Too bad that we weren't told or shown that the killings were happening regularly. You would certainly not get this impression from just watching the show, as we only know of the murder of White Rat and the ambush in the brothel that resulted in Barristan's death. See, this is one of the problems that D&D were sometimes running into. They assume that the audience know what they know as readers of the books, which is why they did not bother to relay to us certain information, for instance, about any of the additional killings. They just assume that the book readers will know that the murders happen every night, but the problem is, many people tuned into this show without reading the books. When you adapt, you don't adapt just for the fans of the source material, but also for people for whom this is a standalone story. The issue of Miri Mazdur not telling Dany in the show that she can't have children, but Season 7 Dany saying that she did, is similar. Anyway, Daenerys is laughing and smiling, so at least there's that, and after Dario somewhat proposes to her and claims that as a queen she can do whatever she wants, we finally have some limited admission from Dany that as a queen she can't do what she wants. This is the most in-character scene in Season 5. Dario makes the suggestion of rounding up all the slave masters of Meereen on the day of the Great Games and slaughtering them all, to which Dany responds that she is not a butcher. And Dario claims that all rulers are butchers. How hollow this rings given that in the previous episodes she just fed 2 guys to her dragons. The creators seem to be on the fence as to whether they write a mini Aerys or a merciful queen. They keep all their options open, which leads to this incoherent mess. Later, Hizdahr and Dany go to see some lesser games before the great ones. Unbeknownst to Dany, Tyrion and Jorah are also about to make an appearance. The Mad Queen in the making is uncomfortable with the butchery, while her abused husband Hizdahr seems thrilled. The Mad Queen in the making is about to leave, and Hizdahr tries to stop her, but seeing this, Jorah puts on a helm and runs outside before she can leave, and starts fighting some other dudes without killing them. This prompts Dany to stay. Tyrion tries to follow, but is chained. Yet some guard just strikes off the chain for plot convenience reasons. The good guy Jorah reveals himself to the cold and standoffish bitch who kept rejecting his genuine love, and she says, in a choked up voice, to get him out of her sight. Jorah screams out that he has a gift for Daenerys, the gift being Tyrion Lannister. You already know what I'm about to say. None of this happens in the books. And while both Tyrion and Jorah try to make their way to Daenerys in A Dance with Dragons, they do not do it yet. In the true canon of this story, these numerous other things happen instead. The Shavepate was accompanied by 2 of his brazen beasts. One wore a hawk mask, the other the likeness of a jackal. Only their eyes could be seen behind the brass. Your Radiance, Hizdahr was seen to enter the Pyramid of Zak last evening. He did not depart until well after dark. How many pyramids has he visited? Asked Dany. 11. And how long since the last murder? 26 days. The Shavepate's eyes brimmed with fury. It had been his notion to have the brazen beasts follow her betrothed and take note of all his actions. So far Hizdahr has made good on his promises. How? The Sons of the Harpy have put down their knives, but why? Because the noble Hizdahr asked sweetly? He is one of them, I tell you. That's why they obey him. He may well be the Harpy. If there is a Harpy. Skahas was convinced that somewhere in Meereen, the Sons of the Harpy had a highborn overlord, a secret general commanding an army of shadows. Dany did not share his belief. The brazen beasts had taken dozens of the Harpy's sons, and those who had survived their capture had yielded names when questioned sharply. Too many names, it seemed to her. It would have been pleasant to think that all the deaths were the work of a single enemy, who might be caught and killed, but Dany suspected that the truth was otherwise. My enemies are legion. Hizdahr Zolorak is a persuasive man with many friends, and he is wealthy. Perhaps he has bought this peace for us with gold, or convinced the other highborn that our marriage is in their best interests. If he is not the Harpy, he knows him. I can find the truth of that easy enough. Give me your leave to put Hisdar to question, and I will bring you a confession. No, she said. I do not trust these confessions. You've brought me too many of them, all of them worthless. Your Radiance, no, I said. The shave-pate scowl turned his ugly face even uglier. A mistake. The great master Hisdar plays your worship for a fool. Do you want a serpent in your bed? I want Dario in my bed. But I sent him away for the sake of you and yours. You may continue to watch Hisdar Zolorak, but no harm is to come to him. Is that understood? I am not deaf, your magnificence. I will obey. Skahas drew a parchment scroll from his sleeve. Your worship should have a look at this. A list of all the Myrinese ships in the blockade, with their captains, great masters all. Then he studied the scroll. All the ruling families of Myrine were named. Haskar, Merek, Quasar, Zak, Razdar, Gazan, Pal, even Raznak and Lorak. What am I to do with a list of names? Every man on that list has kin within the city, sons and brothers, wives and daughters, mothers and fathers. Let my brazen beast seize them. Their lives will win you back those ships. If I send the brazen beast into the pyramids, it will mean open war inside the city. I have to trust in Hisdar. I have to hope for peace. Then he held the parchment above a candle and watched the names go up in flame, while Skahas glowed at her. Afterward, Sir Barristan told her that her brother Rhaegar would have been proud of her. Then remembered the words of Ser Jorah had spoken at Astapor. Rhaegar fought valiantly, Rhaegar fought nobly, Rhaegar fought honorably, and Rhaegar died. Since this show is all about the fighting pits problem, more issues from Dany's arc are omitted. For example, what happens to Astapor? Grey Worm began the tale. He came out of the morning mists, a rider on a pale horse, dying. His mare was staggering as he approached the city gates, her sides pink with blood and lather, her eyes rolling with terror. Her rider called out, she is burning, and fell from the saddle. This one was sent for, and gave orders that the rider be brought to the Blue Graces. When your servants carried him inside the gates, he cried out again, she is burning. Under his tokar he was a skeleton, all bones and fevered flesh. One of the Blue Graces took up the tale from there. The Unsullied brought this man to the temple, when we stripped him and bathed him in cool water. His clothes were soiled, and my sisters found half an arrow in his thigh. Though he had broken off the shaft, the head remained inside him, and the wound had mortified, filling him with poisons. He died within the hour, still crying out that she was burning. She is burning, Daenerys repeated. Who is she? Astapor, your Radiance, said another of the Blue Graces. He said it once. He said, Astapor is burning. It might have been his fever talking. Your Radiance speaks wisely, said Galaza Galare. But Azara saw something else. The Blue Grace called Azara folded her hands. My queen, she murmured. His fever was not brought on by the arrow. He had soiled himself, not once but many times. The stains reached to his knees, and there was dried blood amongst his excrement. His horse was bleeding, Grey Worm said. This thing is true, your grace, the eunuch confirmed. The pale mare was bloody from his spoor. That might be so, your Radiance, said Azara. But this blood was mingled with his stool. It stained his small clothes. He was bleeding from the bowels, said Galaza Galare. We cannot be certain, said Azara. But it may be that Myrine has more to fear than the spears of the Yunkai. We must pray, said the Green Grace. The gods sent this man to us. He comes as a harbinger. He comes as a sign. A sign of what? Asked Dany. A sign of rot and ruin. She did not want to believe that. He was one man, one sick man with an arrow in his leg. A horse brought him here, not a god. A pale mare. Then he rose abruptly. Thank you for your counsel, and for all that you did for this poor man. The Green Grace kissed Dany's fingers before she took her leave. We shall pray for Astapor, and for me. Oh, pray for me, my lady. If Astapor had fallen, nothing remained to prevent Yunkai from turning north. The Weaver raised her hand. Every day we told each other that the Dragon Queen was coming back. The woman had thin lips and dull dead eyes, set in a pinched and narrow face. Cleon had sent for you, it was said, and you were coming. He sent for me, thought Dany. That much is true at least. Outside our walls, the Yunkai devoured our crops and slaughtered our herds, the cobbler went on. Inside we starved. We ate cats and rats and leather. A horse hide was a feast. King Cutthroat and Queen Whore accused each other of feasting on the flesh of the slain. Men and women gathered in secret to draw lots and gorge upon the flesh of him who drew the black stone. The pyramid of Naklos was despoiled and set aflame by those who claimed that Krasnysmo Naklos was to blame for all our woes. Others blamed Daenerys, said the weaver. But more of us still loved you. She is on her way, we said to one another. She is coming at the head of a great host, with food for all. I can scarce feed my own folk. If I had marched to Astapor, I would have lost Meereen. Later we learned that the sick Astapori refugees are making their way to Meereen. With this grievous turn of events, Dany has no choice but to agree to wed his Darzolorak. And when the Astapori do come, Daenerys takes care of them herself, though the only thing her antis focus on is her claiming that she can't get sick due to her Valyrian heritage, which at that time seems to be right given that she does not remember ever being sick. But to them, this of course means that she is an evil Nazi blood purist. Mind you, she was married to a Dothraki and is about to get married to a Giscari. The Astapori stumbled after them in a ghastly procession that grew longer with every yard they crossed. Some spoke tongues she did not understand. Others were beyond speaking. Many lifted their hands to Dany, or knelt as her silver went by. Mother, they called to her, in the dialects of Astapor, Lys, and Old Volantis, in Guttural Dothraki, and the liquid syllables of Karf, even in the common tongue of Westeros. Mother, please. Mother, help my sister, she is sick. Give me food for my little ones. Please, my old father. Help him. Help her. Help me. I have no more help to give, Dany thought, despairing. The Astapori had no place to go. Thousands remained outside Meereen's thick walls. Men and women and children, old men and little girls and newborn babes. Many were sick, most were starved, and all were doomed to die. Daenerys dared not open her gates to let them in. She had tried to do what she could for them. She had sent them healers, blue graces and spell singers, and barber surgeons, but some of those had sickened as well, and none of their arts had stopped the galloping progression of the flux that had come on the pale mare. Separating the healthy from the sick had proved impractical as well. Her stalwart shields had tried, pulling husbands away from wives, and children from their manners, even as the Astapori wept and kicked and pelted them with stones. A few days later, the sick were dead, and the healthy ones were sick. Dividing the one from the other had accomplished nothing. Even feeding them had grown difficult. Every day she sent them what she could, but every day there were more of them and less food to give them. It was growing harder to find drivers willing to deliver the food as well. Too many of the men they had sent into the camp had been stricken by the flags themselves. Others had been attacked on the way back to the city. Yesterday a wagon had been overturned, and 2 of her soldiers killed, so today the queen had determined that she would bring the food herself. Every one of her advisers had argued fervently against it, from Reznak and the Shavepaid to Ser Barristan. But Daenerys would not be moved. I will not turn away from them, she said stubbornly. A queen must know the sufferings of her people. Little children with swollen stomachs trailed after them, too weak or scared to beg. Gaunt men with sunken eyes squatted amidst sand and stones, shitting out their lives in stinking streams of brown and red. Many sat where they slept now, too feeble to crawl to the ditches she'd commanded them to dig. 2 women fought over a charred bone. Nearby a boy of 10 stood eating a rat. He ate one-handed, the other clutching a sharpened stick, lest anyone try to wrest away his prize. Unburied dead lay everywhere. Dany saw one man sprawled in the dirt, under a black cloak, but as she rode past, his cloak dissolved into 1,000 flies. Skeletal women sat upon the ground, clutching dying infants. Their eyes followed her. Those who had the strength called out, Mother, please, Mother, bless you, Mother. Bless me, Dany thought bitterly. Your city is gone to ash and bone, your people are dying all around you. I have no shelter for you, no medicine, no hope. Only stale bread and wormy meat, hard cheese, a little milk. Bless me, bless me. What kind of mother has no milk to feed her children? Too many dead, Ago said. They should be burned. Who will burn them? Asked Ser Barristan. The bloody flax is everywhere. 100 die each night. It is not good to touch the dead, said Drogo. This is known, Ago and Carroll said together. That may be so, said Dany. But this thing must be done, all the same. She thought a moment. The Unsullied have no fear of corpses. I shall speak to Grey Worm. Your Grace, said Sir Barristan. The Unsullied are your best fighters. We dare not lose this plague among them. Let the Astapori bury their own dead. They are too feeble, said Simon Strikeback. Then he said, More food may make them stronger. Simon shook his head. Food should not be wasted on the dying, your worship. We do not have enough to feed the living. He was not wrong, she knew, but that did not make the words any easier to hear. This is fair enough, the queen decided. We will feed them here. She raised a hand. Behind her, the wagons bent to a halt, and her riders spread out around them, to keep the Astapori from rushing at the foot. No sooner had they stopped than the press began to thicken around them, as more and more of the afflicted came limping and shambling towards the wagons. The riders cut them off. Wait your turn, they shouted. No pushing. Back, stay back. Bread for everyone. Wait your turn. Then he could only sit and watch. Sir, she said to Barristan Selmy, is there no more we can do? You have provisions. Provisions for your Grace's soldiers. We may well need to withstand a long siege. The Stormcrows and the Second Sons can harry the Yunkishmen, but they cannot hope to turn them. If your Grace would allow me to assemble an army. If there must be a battle, I would sooner fight it from behind the walls of Meereen. Let the Yunkai try and storm my battlements. The queen surveyed the scene around them. If you were to share our food equally, the Astapori would eat through their portion in days, and we would have that much less for the siege. Then he gazed across the camp, to the many-colored brick walls of Meereen. The air was thick with flies and cries. The gods have sent these pestilence to humble me. So many dead. I will not have them eating corpses. She beckoned Aggo closer. Ride to the gates and bring me Grey Worm and 50 of his Unsullied. Khaleesi, the blood of your blood obeys. Aggo touched his horse with his heels and galloped off. Sir Barristan watched with ill-concealed apprehension. You should not linger here over long, your Grace. The Astapori are being fed, as you commanded. There's no more we can do for the poor wretches. We should repair back to the city. Go if you wish, sir. I will not detain you. I will not detain any of you. And he vaulted down from the horse. I cannot heal them, but I can show them that their mother cares. Drogo sucked in his breath. Khaleesi, no. The bell in his braid rang softly as he dismounted. You must not get any closer. Do not let them touch you. Do not! Then he walked right past him. There was an old man on the ground a few feet away, moaning and staring at the grey belly of the clouds. She knelt beside him, wrinkling her nose at the smell, and pushed back his dirty grey hair to feel his brow. His flesh is on fire. I need water to bathe him. Sea water will serve. Marcellan, will you fetch some for me? I need oil as well, for the pyre. Who will help me burn the dead? By the time Aggo returned with Grey Worm and 50 of the Unsullied, loping behind his horse, then he had shamed all of them into helping her. Simon Strikeback and his men were pulling the living from the dead and stacking up the corpses, while Drogo and Rakaro, under the Dothraki, helped those who could still walk towards the shore to bathe and wash their clothes. Aggo stared at them as if they had all gone mad, but Grey Worm knelt beside the queen and said, this one would be of help. Before midday, a dozen fires were burning. Columns of greasy black smoke rose up to stain a merciless blue sky. Nanny's riding clothes were stained and sooty as she stepped back from the pyres. I dare the Mad Queen, Thruthers, to name one ruler in this story who would be willing to go into the middle of a disease-ridden refuge camp to help the sick and the dying herself. They, of course, won't be able to name a single one. Instead, we will hear something about the unreliable narrators and how Dany risks her life just to make herself seem good. But anyway, because Astapor fell, the Yunkai are about to march on Meereen, but he's their negotiated peace with them. I already showed their conversation before. The general peace agreement is that Dany will not interfere with the slave trade in Yunkai, and will marry Hizdahr to guarantee that peace agreement. Later, Daario arrives to say that the Second Sons have defected, as Dany refused to use dragons against the river blockade, which made Brownben Plum realize that her cause is lost. Then, and only then, does Dany start her relationship with Daario, which she will cut short just as quickly. Fundamentally, all stories ever written are stories about conflict. That is, the clash of opposing forces against a character's own pursuit of a goal. There are 6 basic types of conflict. Character versus self. Character versus character. Character versus nature. Character versus supernatural. character versus technology, character versus society. Dany's and Dance with Dragons arc has 4 out of 6 of these conflicts. There's Dany versus herself, what she actually wants versus what she needs to do, what she strives to be versus what she actually is. All that symbolized beautifully by her donning the tokar and chaining her dragons. It's Dany versus characters, Dany versus Hisdar, Dany versus the Green Grace, even Dany versus Dario to some extent. There's Dany versus the supernatural, the threat of the others and Euron she is not yet aware of, its grave and her prophecies. There's finally Dany versus society, her trying to uproot the continent-wide, thousands years old, abhorrent institution of slavery, and the endless, unwinnable situation that presents. A plague, a refugee crisis, chaos, murder, violence, rape, war. How many of those do we have in the show? There's some character versus character, true. Daenerys versus Hisdar and the issue of the fighting pits. And there's certainly to some degree character versus society, but to boils down to those fighting pits. Because the Sons of the Harpy are not half a threat they are in the books, and the marriage to Hisdar isn't even there to stop the killings. It's there to open the fighting pits. There's no Daenerys versus herself. Because from beginning to end, she thinks she knows best. There is no compromise she could seek, which also undermines her chaining her dragons. It's there, sure, but there's no deeper symbolism behind it. There's no Daenerys versus supernatural, as at this point, all magic from her storyline has been removed from the show. No Quaeve, no prophecies, no Azor Ahai, no Menace Euron. Nothing. It's all about those fucking fighting pits. I understand full well that adapting all of the problems Dany faces would be close to impossible. There is a reason why George struggled so much with this storyline, and he has thousands of pages at his disposal as opposed to several hours of TV. But damn, if you don't want to venture into the fall of Astapor, the Pale Mare and the Yunkai approaching, then at least keep the nightly slaughter of the freedmen so that Dany marrying Hisdar has some stakes aside from the fighting pits. That alone would have given her some urgency to this bore of a storyline. Open every episode Dany appears in with a murder, show us real Nari, show us the other freedmen being killed. And, most importantly, have Hisdar be the alleviation to these problems. Even if you want to keep him as a downtrodden, semi-abolitionist husband and not a self-serving douche, include him offering to negotiate with the Masters of Meereen on Dany's behalf, and out of the goodwill he has already shown. Have the killing stop, and only then for Dany to reward Hisdar for his actions. I really am not a screenwriter, but if the goal is to simplify this storyline, then you can simplify this storyline. But what was left in the show isn't even bare bones. It's just nothing but this goddamn fighting pits. Before we recap Daenerys scenes from this episode, let's ask ourselves a poignant question. Why did the showrunners decide to kill Barristan Selmy? The answer to me is twofold. The most obvious one is that his character is no longer necessary. In the show, there was no false peace Barristan could break, and Hisdar was exactly who he claimed to be. A good, semi-abolitionist man abused by the Mad Queen in the making, who murdered his father, almost murdered him, and forced him to marry her at what was essentially a gunpoint. But there is also the second, hidden answer. If you have two characters whose main purpose is to put a leash on a mad bitch, then obviously you're gonna choose a fan favorite to do that. See, Dany and Tyrion met in the show before they met in the books, because the showrunners wanted to. In later seasons, most of their narrative choices boil down to "we wanted to," without thinking of what it may entail. This is how we got the White Hunt in Season 7, characters and entire armies teleporting, Arya killing the Night King, etc. And one of its instances is introducing Tyrion to Dany's storyline prematurely. They wanted it to happen, so it happened, and since Barristan's character becomes redundant in this instance, they killed him off, plain and simple. And in case you doubt that, yes, Tyrion is here to put a leash on Dany.
Your Grace, I want to
You
say...
will not speak. How do I know you are who you say you are?
If only I were otherwise.
If you are Tyrion Lannister, why shouldn't I kill you? To pay your family back for what it did to mine.
You want revenge against the Lannisters? I killed my mother, Joanna Lannister, on the day I was born. I killed my father, Tywin Lannister, with a bolt to the heart. I am the greatest Lannister killer of our time.
So I should welcome you into my service because you murdered members of your own family.
Into your service? Your Grace, we have only just met. It's too soon to know if you deserve my service.
If you'd rather return to the fighting pits, just say the word.
When I was a young man, I heard a story about a baby born during the worst storm in living memory. She had no wealth, no lands, no army, only a name, and a handful of supporters, most of whom probably thought they could use that name to benefit themselves. They kept her alive, moving her from place to place, often hours ahead of the men who'd been sent to kill her. She was eventually sold off to some warlord on the edge of the world, and that appeared to be that. And then, a few years later, the most well-informed person I knew told me that this girl without wealth, lands, or armies had somehow acquired all three in a very short span of time, along with 3 dragons. He thought she was our best, last chance to build a better world. Thought you were worth meeting at the very least.
And why are you worth meeting? Why should I spend my time listening to you?
Because you cannot build a better world on your own. You have no one at your side who understands the land you want to rule, the strengths and weaknesses of the houses that will either join or oppose you.
I will have a very large army. And very large dragons.
Killing and politics aren't always the same thing. When I served as Hand of the King, I did quite well with the latter, considering the king in question preferred torturing animals to leading his people. I could do an even better job, advising a ruler worth the name, if that is indeed what you are.
So you want to advise me? Very well. What would you have me do with him? I swore I would kill him if he ever returned.
I know.
Why should the people trust a queen who can't keep her promises?
Whomever Ser Jorah was when he started informing on you, he is no longer that man. Can't remember ever seeing a sane man as devoted to anything as he is to serving you. He claims he would kill for you and die for you, and nothing I have witnessed gives me reason to doubt him. And yet he did betray you. Did he have an opportunity to confess his betrayal?
Yes, many opportunities.
And did he?
No, not until forced to do so.
He worships you. He is in love, I think. He did not trust the truth, an unpleasant truth, to be sure, but one of great significance to you. Did not trust that you would be wise enough to forgive him.
So I should kill him.
A ruler who kills those devoted to her is not a ruler who inspires devotion. Going to need to inspire a lot of if you're ever going to rule across the narrow sea. But you cannot have him by your side when you...
Remove Ser Jorah from the city.
Let's count the lines uttered by each character in this scene. By lines, I mean every single sentence spoken by a character in that scene. Missandei, 0 lines. Jorah, 1 line. Daenerys, 17 lines. Tyrion, 37 lines. Together, they speak 55 sentences. Missandei speaks 0% of the time. Jorah speaks 2% of the time. Dany speaks 31% of the time. Tyrion speaks 67% of the time. He has more than half the lines than Daenerys does. And most of it is, aside from tempering Daenerys, pardon me for using that word, pure mansplaining. First, he mansplains to her that she cannot take him into her service just like that, cause apparently she's too stupid to realize it herself. Then, he mansplains to her that she cannot build a better world all on her own. Then he mansplains to her that she needs a Westerosi by her side to help her understand Westerosi politics. Then he mansplains to her that she can't just kill her way out of conquering Westeros with armies and dragons. Then he mansplains to her why Jorah kept the truth about his spying from her. Because if it ever came to light, the merciless and evil queen would murder the good devoted man. Then he mansplains to her that she can't kill people who are devoted to her. Then he mansplains to her that Jorah can be by her side when she lands in the West. The condensation with which D&D, who wrote this particular episode by the way, treat Daenerys is just laughable at this point. Many of those statements stand in a direct contradiction to her character as well. Book Daenerys wanted to forgive Jorah, but contrary to his show self, he never did anything to deserve forgiveness. He was cavalier about his crimes. He was a huge hypocrite and he basically demanded that Dany must forgive him. See, of course Jorah was made better in this show. He had to be in order to demonize Daenerys, to make his betrayal land softer, and the fact that he hid the fact that he was spying was not a matter of his two-facedness, but borderline fear of his life. And Book Daenerys knows that she can't take Westeros by force alone, else she would be using the dragons from day one in Meereen as opposed to chaining them. Later, Dany and Tyrion talk in her private apartments.
So have you decided yet whether I'm worthy of your service?
Have you decided yet whether you're going to have me killed?
It's probably my safest option.
I can see why you would think so. It's what your father would have done.
And what would your father have done?
My father publicly sentenced me to death. I'd say his thoughts on having me killed were abundantly clear.
Is that why you killed him?
Someday, if you decide not to execute me, I'll tell you all about why I killed my father. And on that day, should it ever come, we'll need more wine than this.
I know what my father was, what he did. I know the Mad King earned his name.
So, here we sit, two terrible children of two terrible fathers.
I'm terrible.
I've heard stories.
Why did you travel to the far side of the world to meet someone terrible?
To see if you were the right kind of terrible.
Which kind is that?
The kind that prevents your people from being even more so.
Well, I did reopen the fighting pits. Under my rule, murder will once again become entertainment.
Yes, that was wise. And you agreed to marry someone you loathe for the greater good. Very impressive. My own sister married someone she loathed as well. Though not by choice, and certainly not for the greater good, God forbid. She ended up having him killed.
Perhaps it won't come to that.
It's not impossible that Varys was right about you after all.
Varys? King Robert's spy master?
Yes, he's the one who convinced me to come find you. He was my traveling companion before Sir Jorah seized that role for himself.
Jorah sent my secrets to Varys. For 20 years, the Spider oversaw the campaign to find and kill me.
He did what he had to do to survive. He did a lot of other things as well, things he didn't have to do. I suspect he's the main reason you weren't slaughtered in your crib.
But you trust him?
Yes, oddly. He may be the only person in the world I trust. Except my brother.
The brother who killed my father?
That's the one.
Perhaps I will have you killed after all.
Your queenly prerogative. I'd given up on life. Until Varys convinced me you might be worth living for. You chop off my head. Well, my final days were interesting.
I'm not going to kill you.
No? Banish me?
No.
So if I'm not going to be murdered and I'm not going to be banished...
You're going to advise me, while you can still speak in complete sentences.
Advise you on what?
How to get what I want.
The Iron Throne. Perhaps you should try wanting something else.
If I want jokes, I'll get myself a proper fool.
I'm not entirely joking. There's more to the world than Westeros, after all. How many hundreds of thousands of lives have you changed for the better here? Perhaps this is where you belong, where you can do the most good.
I fought so that no child born into Slavers Bay would ever know what it meant to be bought or sold. I will continue that fight here and beyond, but this is not my home.
When you get back to your home, who supports you?
The common people.
Let's be generous and assume that's going to happen. Here in Slavers Bay, you had the support of the common people, and only the common people. What was that like, ruling without the rich? House Targaryen is gone. Not a single person who shares your blood is alive to support you. The Starks are gone as well. Our two terrible fathers saw to that. The remaining members of House Lannister will never back you, not ever. Stannis Baratheon won't back you either. His entire claim to the throne rests on the illegitimacy of yours. That leaves the Tyrells. Not impossible, not enough.
Lannister, Targaryen, Baratheon, Stark, Tyrell. They're all just spokes on a wheel. This one's on top, then that one's on top, and on it spins, crushing those on the ground.
It's a beautiful dream. Stopping the wheel. You're not the first person who's ever dreamt.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
There are many bad things in this exchange, and one good one. Let's start with the good one. The fact that, for the first time in several seasons, Daenerys verbalizes the fact that she sees Westeros as a potential home. She did that first in season 2 when she was imprisoned by Pyat Pree. Long overdue, and she does not elaborate on that further, but credit where credit is due, I suppose. Now on to the bad things. Dany's decision to have Tyrion as her advisor comes out of nowhere. So far as I can tell, she has zero reasons to trust him. He was sent by Varys, who in season 1 gave his stamp of approval for the assassination. Tyrion, being a Westerosi noble familiar with the Westerosi Game of Thrones, would not be enough for Dany to accept him into her court. No strings attached. Nor do I think it will happen in the books like that. In the book, there will definitely be the same mistrust as here, and I do think they may talk about their fathers in particular, without Daenerys being baffled at being called terrible, since she thinks of herself as a monster already. But by the time Dany returns from the Dothraki Sea, Tyrion would have already made steps to prove himself worthy of that service. For starters, in the sample chapter of Winds, Book Tyrion made the second sons rejoin Dany with his wit alone. I suspect that Tyrion may be crucial in managing the fragile situation in Meereen, or do something similar to make himself worthy of Dany putting her faith in him. In the show, Dany accepts Tyrion into that position because the showrunners want him to have that position, and never bothered to ask themselves the question of, is that plausible? If you ever read any Winds predictions, you definitely stumbled onto those very popular ones that claim the following. Daenerys expects to be unconditionally loved in Westeros, and when that doesn't happen and there will be someone more beloved than her on the throne, omitted from the show, we will get to that in a second, she will throw a temper tantrum and slaughter everyone. No doubt another residue from the show, where Daenerys herself is inconsistent with regards to whether she thinks the people are waiting for her. In Season 1, Jorah tells Daenerys that the common people pray for mundane things, not for the return of the exiled kings. In conversation with Jorah, Dany says that Viserys was a fool to believe that, only to later say to Piat-Pri that the common people wait for her. And now she makes this boisterous claim that the common people will raise for her, so that Tyrion can mansplain to her that this isn't the case, and make her seem naive and arrogant. In the books, Daenerys does not at any point think that the people must certainly wait for her. Quite the opposite. Then, another residue from the show is the break the wheel situation. The implication here being that Dany's goal is not just the throne, but to end feudalism, I suppose? Which is, of course, meant to be seen as hypocritical since she is part of that wheel. Ezoya fans tend to single Dany out as a singular feudal monarch in this story. It is the Starks' God-given right to be feudal monarchs, but Daenerys has to die because she wants to be a queen, and with her, feudalism will sort of die as well. The bad feudalism at least, because, as we all know, the benevolent feudalism of the Starks is fine and dandy. I have a lingering suspicion that this particular invocation of the nebulous wheel might have contributed to this perception that Dany's death is a necessary prerequisite for the destruction of feudalism, which is funny given that Dany never says anything about breaking the wheel in the books. The issue persists, however. People do talk about how Book Daenerys wants to destroy the wheel because, once again, the adaptation completely overtook their perception of the source material. I honestly think that D&D never really intended for this to be some revolutionary message. They included this line so that Dany can have one more badass one-liner they can use in a trailer. And if you seriously think that the story based on the Wars of the Roses is gonna end with the end of feudalism, I have some news for you. In Daenerys 7 ADWD, Dany spends several nights with Daario ahead of her marriage to Hisdar. If she had been some ordinary woman, she would gladly have spent her whole life touching Daario, tracing his scars and making him tell her how he'd come by everyone. I would give up my crown if he asked it of me, Dany thought. But he had not asked it, and never would. Daario might whisper words of love when the two of them were as one, but she knew it was the Dragon Queen he loved. If I gave up my crown, he would not want me. Besides, kings who lost their crowns oft lost their heads as well, and she could see no reason why it would be any different for a queen. So much for her unconditionally trusting him and not seeing his true intentions. And rather than to hold absolute power over Hisdar the way she does in the show, Dany is seen compromising more and more of her power for his sake. Will you hold court today? No. On the morrow I will be a woman wed, and Hisdar will be king. Let him hold court. These are his people. Some are his, some are yours, the ones you freed. Are you chiding me? The ones you call your children. They want their mother. You are chiding me. Only a little, bright heart. Would you come hold court? After my wedding, perhaps. After the peace. This after that you speak of never comes. You should hold court. Another omission is the dream Dany has the next day. Beneath her coverlets, she tossed and turned, dreaming that his there was kissing her. But his lips were blue and bruised, and when he thrust himself inside her, his manhood was cold as ice. This is the second time the slavers of Essos are textually linked with ice, and Dany's abolitionist campaign to her fight against the others. First time happened in A Storm of Swords, when Dany dreams of herself as Rhaegar fighting on the Trident, but the usurper host being armored in ice. This happens right before the Dracarys maneuver. Dragon dreams? Never heard of them. Season 5 saw a lot of characters cut from the show, including Quentyn Martell, who makes his appearance in this very chapter. Quentyn arrives in time to tempt Dany with Westeros one last time, informing of a secret marriage pact that was most likely signed in the house with the Red Door in Braavos, as the Sea Lord was a witness. The parchment was written in the common tongue. The Queen unrolled it slowly, studying the seals and signatures. When she saw the name Sir Willem Darry, her heart beat a little faster. She read it over once, and then again. May we know what it says, Your Grace? Asked Sir Barristan. It is a secret pact, Dany said. Made in Braavos, when I was just a girl. Sir Willem Darry signed for us, the man who spirited my brother and myself away from Dragonstone, before the usurper's men could take us. Prince Oberyn Martell signed for Dorne, with the Sea Lord of Braavos as witness. She handed the parchment to Sir Barristan, so he might read it for himself. The alliance is to be sealed by a marriage, it says. In return for Dorne's help overthrowing the usurper, my brother Viserys is to take Prince Doran's daughter Arianne for his queen. Your Grace, I have the honor to be Quentyn Martell, a prince of Dorne, and your most loyal subject. Dany laughed. The Dornish prince flushed red. Willis, her own court, and councillors gave her puzzled looks. Radiance, said Skahas Shavepate, in the Giscari tongue. Why do you laugh? They call him Frog, she said. And we have just learned why. In the Seven Kingdoms, there are children's tales of frogs who turn into enchanted princes when kissed by their true love. Smiling at the Dornish knights, she switched back to the common tongue. Tell me, Prince Quentyn, are you enchanted? No, Your Grace. I feared as much. Neither enchanted nor enchanting, alas. A pity he's the prince, and not the one with the white shoulders and the sandy hair. You have come for a kiss, however. You mean to marry me. Is that the way of it? The gift you bring me is your own sweet self. Instead of Viserys and your sister, you and I must seal this pact if I want Dorne. Would that you have come a year ago. I am pledged to wed the noble Hisdar Zolorak. Ser Gerrys said. It is not too late. I will be the judge of that, Daenerys said. Reznach, see that the prince and his companions are given quarters suitable to their high birth, and that their wants are attended to. All Dany Antai's focus on here is that Dany does not find Quentyn handsome enough, of course, but he offers her something Hisdar doesn't. Westeros. Human heart in conflict with itself once more. Dany steadily chooses the freedman ahead of her dreams of Westeros. Dany and Missandei, who are supposed to be best friends, don't talk in the show. They talk in the books, however. When he was gone, Missandei brought the queen a simple meal of goat cheese and olives, with raisins for a sweet. Your Grace needs more than wine to break her fast. You are such a tiny thing, and you will surely need your strength today. That made Daenerys laugh, coming from a girl so small. She relied so much on the little scribe that oft forgot that Missandei had only turned 11. They shared the food together on her terrace. As Dany nibbled on an olive, the nappy girl gazed at her with eyes like molten gold and said, It is not too late to tell them that you have decided not to wed. It is though, the queen thought, sadly. Hisdar's blood is ancient and noble. Our joining will join mine freedmen to his people. When we become as one, so will our city. Your Grace does not love the noble Hisdar. This one thinks you would sooner have another for your husband. I must not think of Daria today. A queen loves where she must, not where she will. As Dany makes her way to the wedding, she asks Barristan about her family, something her show self doesn't do because she apparently doesn't care about her family. Tell me, Dany said, as the procession turned towards the Temple of the Graces. If my father and my mother had been free to follow their own hearts, whom would they have wed? It was long ago. Your Grace would not know them. You know, though. Tell me. The old knight inclined his head. The queen, your mother, was always mindful of her duty. He was handsome in his gold and silver armor, his white cloak streaming from his shoulders, but he sounded like a man in pain, as if every word were a stone he had to pass. As a girl, though, she was once smitten with a young knight from the Stormlands, who wore her favor at a tourney and named her Queen of Love and Beauty. A brief thing. What happened to this knight? He put away his lance the day your lady mother wed your father. Afterward he became most pious, and was heard to say that only the maiden could replace Queen Rhaella in his heart. His passion was impossible, of course. A landed knight is no fit consort for a princess of royal blood. And Dariona Harris is only a sellsword, not fit to buckle on the golden spurs of even a landed knight. And my father? Was there some woman he loved better than his queen? Sir Barristan shifted in the saddle. Not loved. Perhaps wanted is a better word, but it was only kitchen gossip, the whispers of washerwomen and stable boys. I want to know. I never knew my father. I want to know everything about him. The good and the rest. As you command. The White Knight chose his words with care. Prince Aerys, as a youth, he was taken with a certain lady of Casterly Rock, a cousin of Tywin Lannister. When she and Tywin wed, your father drank too much wine at the wedding feast, and was heard to say that it was a great pity that the Lord's rights to the first night had been abolished. A drunken jape, no more. But Tywin Lannister was not a man to forget such words, or the liberties your father took during the wedding. His face reddened. I have said too much, Your Grace. The show has Dany and Hisdar married off-screen apparently, but it's different in the books. Side by side, the Queen's procession and Hisdar's Zolorax made their slow way across Meereen, until finally the Temple of the Graces loomed up before them, its golden domes flashing in the sun. How beautiful, the Queen tried to tell herself, but inside her was some foolish little girl who could not help but look about for Dario. If he loved you, he would come and carry you off at sword point, as Rhaegar carried off his northern girl. The girl in her insisted. But the Queen knew that was folly. Even if her captain was mad enough to attempt it, the brazen beasts would cut him down before he got within 100 yards of her. The Graces brought forth an ivory chair and a golden bowl. Holding her tokar daintily so as not to tread upon its fringes, Daenerys Targaryen eased herself onto the chair's plush velvet seat, and Hisdar Zolorak went to his knees, unlaced her sandals, and washed her feet, whilst 50 eunuchs sang and 10,000 eyes looked on. He has gentle hands, she mused, as warm fragrant oils ran between her toes. If he has a gentle heart as well, I might grow fond of him in time. Beautiful, right? Maybe it will all work out in the end. Maybe. Until you read the last line of the chapter. 4 hours later, they emerge again as man and wife, bound together wrist and ankle with chains of yellow gold. Dany's marriage to Hisdar is linked to chains, to slavery. This is an act of Dany re-enslaving herself for her freedmen. Human heart in conflict with itself. A queen belongs to her people, not to herself. Compare and contrast with show Daenerys forcing poor Hisdar to marry her at gunpoint. After the marriage, the Yunkai come to celebrate this absolutely real, tangible, and amazing peace. I hate this, thought Daenerys Targaryen. How did this happen? That I am drinking and smiling with men I would sooner flay. And his curse touched a bite. This is peace, she told herself. This is what I wanted, what I worked for. This is why I married Hisdar. So why does it taste so much like defeat? It is only for a little while more, my love, Hisdar had assured her. The Yunkai will soon be gone, and their allies and hirelings with them. We shall have all we desired. Peace, food, trade. Our port is open once again, and ships are being permitted to come and go. They are permitting that, yes, she had replied. But their warships remain. They can close their fingers around our throat again whenever they wish. They have opened a slave market within sight of my walls. Outside our walls, sweet queen. That was a condition of the peace, that Yunkai would be free to trade in slaves as before, unmolested. In their own city, not where I have to see it. The wise masters had established their slave pens and auction block just south of the Skahadazan, where the White-Brown River flowed into Slaver's Bay. They are mocking me to my face, making a show of how powerless I am to stop them. No queen has clean hands, Dany told herself. She thought of Doria, of Quaro, of Iroe, of a little girl she had never met, whose name had been Hazea. Better a few should die in the pit than thousands at the gates. This is the price of peace. I pay it willingly. If I look back, I am lost. As a small refresher, Quaro is a member of her cause that was killed by Drogo's Blood Riders in AGOT. Surely Mad Queens in the making blamed themselves for the deaths of their people years afterwards. And, as we learn, Dany compromises more and more of her power now that Hisdar is king. The Shave Pate was absent as well. The first thing Hisdar had done upon being crowned was to remove him from command of the Brazen Beasts, replacing him with his own cousin, the plump and pasty Markas Zolorak. It is for the best. The Green Grace says there is blood between Lorak and Kandak, and the Shave Pate never made a secret of his disdain for my lord husband. When the gluttony was done and all the half-eaten food had been cleared away to be given to the poor who gathered below, at the queen's insistence, tall glass flutes were filled with a spice liqueur from Karcz, as dark as amber. Surely Mad Queens in the making would give their own food to the starving freedmen. Right, of course. I forgot that Dany only does it to make herself seem good and make herself feel good, not out of some genuine compassion. Later, we have an admission from Brown Ben Plum himself as to why the second sons defected. Wine cups in hand, the Yunkai wandered the garden in small groups, beneath lemon trees and night-blooming flowers, and Dany found herself face to face with Brown Ben Plum. He bowed low. "Worship, you look lovely." "Well, you always did. None of the Yunkish men are half so pretty. I thought I might bring a wedding gift for you, but the bidding went too high for old Brown Ben. I want no gifts from you." "This one you might. The head of an old foe." "Your own?" she said sweetly. "You betrayed me." Now that's a harsh way of putting it, if you don't mind me saying. Brown Ben scratched at his speckled grey and white whiskers. "We went over to the winning side, is all. Same as we done before. If weren't all me neither. I put it to my men. My boys didn't care to die, that's all. And when I told them that you couldn't unleash them dragons against the Yunkish men, well, you saw me as defeated," Dany thought. "And who am I to say that you were wrong? I understand." Then Dany decides to test Quentyn one last time by making him see the dragons and warns him that Meereen isn't safe for him. As the day ends, Dany and Hisdar retreat to their chambers. Once again, remember show Hisdar being a poor abused husband as you listen to the following passage, and then remember how Dany's marriage to him in the books is linked to slavery. The excitement of the day had inflamed her husband's passions. No sooner had her handmaids retired for the night than he tore the rope from her and tumbled her backwards into bed. Then slid her arms around him and let him have his way. Drunk as he was, she knew he would not be inside her long. Nor was he. Afterward he nuzzled at her ear and whispered, "God's grant that we have made a son tonight." Then we have another conversation between Dany and Missandei. In the show, these best friends seem to not talk at all. "My queen?" said a soft voice in the darkness. Dany flinched. "Who is there?" "Only Missandei." The Nathi scribe moved closer to the bed. "This one heard you crying." "Crying? I wasn't crying. Why would I cry? I have my peace, I have my king, I have everything a queen may wish for. You had a bad dream, that was all." "As you say, your grace." She bowed and made to go. "Stay," said Dany. "I do not wish to be alone." "His grace is with you," Missandei pointed out. "His grace is dreaming, but I cannot sleep. On the morrow I must bathe in blood, the price of peace." She smiled wanly and patted the bed. "Come, sit, talk with me, if it please you." Missandei sat down beside her. "What shall we talk of?" "Home," said Dany. "Nav, butterflies and brothers. Tell me of the things that make you happy, the things that make you giggle, all your sweetest memories. Remind me that there is still good in the world." Missandei did her best. She was still talking when Dany finally fell to sleep, to dream queer, half-formed dreams of smoke and fire. The morning came too soon. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go! The resolution to the entire storyline. The fighting pits. Dum-da-da-dum! Fanfares, please! As the games are about to begin, Daenerys looks uncomfortable, but notices that both the freedmen and the masters sit together. I naively thought that maybe the show will introduce us to the book pit fighters, maybe Barcena or Spotted Cat. But no, these guys aren't even named. When they announce they fight for Dany's glory, she seems plainly miserable. Dario subtly woos Dany right into Hisdar's face, claiming that the smaller man will win. Hisdar does some yapping about how size is better, Dany assesses him. Dario joins in the abuse and mockery poor Hisdar has been facing the entire season, but my problematic fave gets the last laugh when the man he betted on, the stronger one, wins. Just look at that smirk. Joel Fry, I know you would have killed it as book Hisdar. I'm sorry it has come to this. Tyrion isn't necessarily enjoying himself either, and when they start discussing what is going on, Hisdar says that no good thing has ever been accomplished without brutality, as camera pans to Daenerys. I'm sure the Mad Queen knows a thing or two about that. Tyrion says that Tywin would have liked Hisdar. I thought it may be some wild suggestion for Dany, an inside joke of sorts, but she doesn't react. To be frank, this scene threw me off. I didn't remember it, as I didn't remember most of Season 5, given that I repressed it from my memory due to how bad it was. I'm not sure what the show is trying to say here. Shaw Hisdar, for what we know of him, is a great guy. His poor daddy was murdered for a crime he didn't commit by a genocidal foreign invader. Said invader almost murdered him by dragonfire as well, and then forced him to marry her. This entire time, his sole goal was reopening the fighting pits, which was a matter of cultural preservation against this evil imperialist. Would such a man be liked by a monster such as Tywin Lannister? Yeah, about that. David Benioff. Tywin wasn't torturing prostitutes for pleasure. He wasn't a sadist. He was ruthless, for sure, but there's an argument to be made that Westeros needs ruthlessness. I don't think of him as evil. Then wise. I would call him lawful neutral. Tywin's ruthlessness, such as slaughtering people at a wedding, forcing his 13-year-old son to rape his first wife, just to name a few of his deeds, makes him a true neutral, and he is not evil, but merely ruthless. Daenerys' ruthlessness against those who own human beings like chattel makes her an evil Mad Queen. This comment, my father would have liked you, is meant as a compliment for Hisdar. Anyway, Dany makes a thinly veiled threat again, according to which she is ready to reduce Meereen to dust if necessity strikes. Her show self really is obsessed with threatening to murder everyone, is she not? Hisdar's response is that of yet another man that has to put a leash on Dany, and he sasses her by insinuating that Dany thinks she knows best when this isn't the case. Tyrion interferes and smugly calls Hisdar an idiot, and Dany smiles. Looks like Tyrion is joining Eve with the imperialist husband abuser. Then it turns out that one of the pit fighters is Jorah Mormont. Daario is apparently allowed to tell the king of Meereen to shut the fuck up. Dany allows Jorah to fight, Tyrion is horrified, but Jorah smiles like this is what he had expected. I don't know what this is supposed to be, an evil Mad Queen once more discarded the feelings of her loyal knights, or something Jorah wanted all along. Jorah proceeds to get absolutely smoked, but don't worry, he has plot armor so he won't die. The evil Mad Queen is visibly worried for him. Tyrion urges Dany to stop the fight, Hisdar says she can't do it. The favor eventually turns for Jorah and he emerges victorious. Only, as it turns out, there is a son of a Harpy approaching Dany and he throws a spear at him and kills him. How did Jorah know that this is someone that needed to be killed? How did this guy get there? Who was he? We have no idea and we're not supposed to think about that. The Sons of the Harpy don their masks and emerge from the crowd. Absolute chills at the visuals and soundtrack. They look absolutely menacing in those masks, and the whispers in the soundtrack make it seem like they are really hissing commands and instructions to each other. I encourage everyone to open a separate tab and rewatch this particular moment. It's so ingrained in my memory that I remember exactly what I was doing on the day I watched this episode for the first time. Or at least what I was doing later that day, because after the episode ended, my parents and I went to buy me a dress for a prom that marked the end of middle school for me. I still have this dress, by the way. And yes, it still fits me. But good visuals aren't enough to make this scene make sense. Because you see, these Sons of the Harpy, some of whom were disguised as the freedmen, began aimlessly slaughtering everyone in the arena, former masters and freedmen alike. Actually, I saw more shots of them killing the masters than the former slaves. Why? Are they seen as collaborators for merely attending the great games that everyone and their mama is supposed to love? The disinterest the showrunners have with this storyline is evident. See, the Sons attack because it makes for an epic action scene that they've become so preoccupied with in later seasons. Like I already said, simplifying this storyline is one thing, but there's also the fact that the Sons of the Harpy are aimless, and their sole goal seems to be violence for violence's sake. I can't believe I have to low-key defend them, but their violence, horrific as it is incredibly strategic. They target the freedmen and the Shavepates, no one else. The Sons are also so heavily organized, have such a pristine chain of command, that these murders can be stopped overnight. Here, what the fuck is their goal? Just slaughtering everyone? D&D sometimes forget that they are not limited by POV structure anymore. Their camera is omniscient, and not limited to Dany's perspective. You don't want Galaza? Then create a new character, a new leader of the Harpy. Show the Sons conspiring in the dark alleys in those amazing masks. Show them commit these murders. Show us what are their actual goals. Give them a voice on their own. You want some drama? Then make the leader a member of Dany's court, who is then revealed during the games or something like that. Like, this isn't my job, guys, and yet I am able to come up with something that makes more sense than what these allegedly professional screenwriters can do. The Unsullied try to counter this baseless attack, but to no avail. And then, Isla just fucking dies. Trigger warning, I'm about to sing, which I can't do, so if you don't want your ears to bleed, skip to this timestamp. When on the road to sweet Mirin Harzu, Harzu. When on the road to sweet Mirin Harzu, Harzu. When on the road to sweet Mirin, a stick in the hand, a drop in the eye, a doleful damsel I hear cry, is that we hardly knew ya. We had swords and drums and drums and swords, Harzu, Harzu. We had swords and drums and drums and swords, Harzu, Harzu. We had swords and drums and drums and swords, and the Harpy stones slew ya. Oh darling dear, you look so clear, is that we hardly knew ya. What could you say about Shohistar? His dad was crucified as a whoopsie to show that some slave masters are good and deserve to be spared. He wanted to reopen the fighting pits. He was in Dany's council. Dany almost killed him on a whim. But what can you say about him as a person? How did he develop over the course of the season he was in? So far as I could tell, if he was removed from the narrative, nothing would have changed. He did not play his own Game of Thrones. He was tossed around wherever the narrative needed him. He needed to be there solely to be the advocate to the fighting pits and to make Daenerys seem unhinged. He randomly became king, he had some canty lines, and then died. Substitute him with a random Harzu with no speaking lines, and he stays the same. It really is all about these fighting pits. All for it to not even be entertaining, or particularly well shot or interesting. Not you, the Sons of the Harpy, I will sing praises to these visuals until the day I die. Maybe the whole fighting pit issue was there to set the stage for Drogon's arrival at Dazlak speed. No, rest assured, they screwed that up as well. Dany and her team get cornered in the middle of the pit. I'm killing myself in my mind at the fact that these visuals were so horrendously wasted. And Dany closes her eyes while seemingly accepting death. Shame that these people didn't kill her here and there to prevent her nuking a city with hundreds of people inside in 3 years. What saves them all is Drogon's surprise arrival. He, of course, only kills the bad guys, not one Unsullied is caught in the crossfire. Daenerys approaches her son, stands her guard, hops onto his back and flies away. Thank you Ramin Djawadi for putting a huge band-aid on this mess. Well, I just said that they screwed up one of the most memorable scenes in the show. The CGI really sucks if you look closely, but that's not the problem I have with this scene. The problem I have is with how Dany got into the middle of the pit and how she faced Drogon. Let's compare the great games to how they played out in the books. First thing that strikes me is that there is one tiny voice that opposes the reopening of the pits. Even if the pits must open, must your grace go yourself? Asked Missandei as she was washing the queen's hair. Half of Meereen will be there to see me, gentle heart. Your grace, said Missandei. This one begs leave to say that half of Meereen will be there to watch men bleed and die. She is not wrong, the queen knew. But it makes no matter. Soon Dany was as clean as she was ever going to be. She pushed herself to her feet, splashing softly. Water ran down her legs and bedded on her breasts. The sun was climbing up the sky, and her people would soon be gathering. She would rather have drifted in the fragrant pool all day, eating ice fruit off silver trays, and dreaming of a house with the red door. But a queen belongs to her people, not to herself. For the record, Missandei again has no speaking lines in this episode. Apparently, she can't even join the bullying of Histar. While in the show, poor Hisdar is killed by the sons of the Harpy for the crime of being forced into a marriage, in the books, something else and peculiar happens. Hisdar had stoked their bogs with flagons of chilled wine and sweet water, with figs, dates, melons, and pomegranates, with pecans and peppers, and a big bowl of honey locusts. Strong Belvas bellowed, "Locusts!" as he seized the bowl and began to crunch them by the handful. "Those are very tasty," advised Hisdar. "You ought to try a few yourself, my love. They are rolled in spice before the honey, so they are sweet and hot at once." "That explains the way Belvas is sweeting," Danny said. "I believe I will content myself with figs and dates. Also, take note of how the pit itself is designed." Across the pit, the Graces sat in flowing robes of many colors, clustered around the austere figure of Galaza Galare, who alone amongst them wore the green. The great masters of Meereen occupied the red and orange benches. The women were veiled, and the men had brushed and lacquered their hair into horns and hands and spikes. Hisdar's skin of the ancient line of Lorak seemed to favor tokars of purple and indigo and lilac, whilst those of Pal were stripped in pink and white. The envoys from Yunkai were all in yellow and filled the box beside the kings, each of them with his slaves and servants. Meereenese of lesser birth crowded the upper ties, more distant from the carnage. The black and purple benches, highest and most distant from the sand, were crowded with freedmen and other common folk. The sellswords had been placed up there as well, Daenerys saw. Their captains seated right amongst the common soldiers. She spied brown bands with their face, and Bloodbird's fiery red whiskers and long braids. The best places in the pit, occupied by the former masters and envoys from Yunkai, are placed at the very bottom. This will become important later, so keep it in mind. Her lord husband stood and raised his hands. "Great masters, my queen has come this day to show her love for you, her people. By her grace and with her leave, I give you now your mortal art. Meereen, let Queen Daenerys hear your love." 10,000 throats roared out their thanks, then 20,000, then all. They did not call her name, which few of them could pronounce. "Mother," they cried instead, in the old dead tongue of Gis. The word was Misa. They stamped their feet and slapped their bellies and shouted, "Misa, Misa, Misa," until the whole pit seemed to tremble. Dany let the sound wash over her. "I am not your mother," she might have shouted back. "I am the mother of your slaves, of every boy who ever died upon these sands, whilst you gorge on honeyed locusts." Behind her, Resna leaned in to whisper in her ear, "Magnificence! Hear how they love you." No, she knew. They love their mortal art. And wouldn't you know, the Mad Queen who loves murdering children has this to say about one of the pit fighters. "This one shows much promise, my sweet," Hisdar said of a Lysian youth with long blonde hair that fluttered in the wind. But his foe grabbed a handful of that hair, pulled the boy off balance, and gutted him. In death, he looked even younger than he had with blade in hand. "A boy," said Dany. "He was only a boy." 6 and 10, Hisdar insisted. "A man grown, who freely chose to risk his life for gold and glory. No children die in Daznax, as my gentle queen in her wisdom has decreed." Another small victory. "Perhaps I cannot make my people good," she told herself, "but I should at least try to make them a little less bad." Mind you, Daenerys is roughly of the same age as this boy. The battle was followed by the day's first folly, a tilt between a pair of jousting dwarfs, presented by one of the Yunkish lords that Hisdar had invited to the games. One rode a hound, the other a sow. Their wooden armor had been freshly painted, so one bore the stag of the usurper Robert Baratheon, the other the golden lion of House Lannister. That was for her sake, plainly. Their antics soon had Belvas snorting laughter, though Dany's smile was faint and forced. When the dwarf in red tumbled from the saddle and began to chase his sow across the sands, whilst the dwarf on the dog galloped after him, whapping at his buttocks with a wooden sword, she said, "This is sweet and silly, but—" "Be patient, my sweet," said Hisdar. "They are about to lose the lions." Daenerys gave him a quizzical look. "Lions?" "3 of them. The dwarves will not expect them." She frowned. "The dwarves have wooden swords, wooden armor. How do you expect them to fight lions?" "Badly," said Hisdar. "Though perhaps they will surprise us. More like they will shriek and run about and try to climb out of the pit. That is what makes this a folly." Dany was not pleased. "I forbid it. Gentle queen, you do not want to disappoint your people. You swore to me that the fighters would be grown men who had freely consented to risk their lives for gold and honor. These dwarfs did not consent to battle lions with wooden swords. You will stop it, now." The king's mouth tightened. For a heartbeat, Dany thought she saw a flash of anger in those placid eyes. As you command. Hisdar beckoned to his pitmaster. No lions. Now, think what would have happened if Dany was not there to stop it, and how many of such injustices are happening all around Meereen, where she can't interfere, let alone in Yunkai, where slavery is allowed to continue. And do I even have to mention the symbolism of Dany saving Tyrion from lions? Then several things happen at once. Barcena is killed, and Dany realizes that she's had enough. The boar buried his snout in Barcena's belly and began rooting out her entrails. The smell was more than the queen could stand. The heat, the flies, the shouts from the crowd. I cannot breathe. She lifted her veil and let it flutter away. She took her tokar off as well. The pearls rattled softly against one another as she unwound the sick. Khaleesi, Iri asked. What are you doing? Taking off my floppy ears. A dozen men with boar spears came trotting out onto the sand to drive the boar away from the corpse and back to his pen. The pitmaster was with them, a long barbed whip in his hand. As he snapped it at the boar, the queen rose. Sir Barristan, will you see me safely back to my garden? Hisdar looked confused. There is more to come, a folly, 6 old women, and 3 more matches. Belako and Gorgor. Belako will win, Iri declared. It is known. It is not known, Jigwe said. Belako will die. One will die, or the other will, said Dany. And the one who lives will die some other day. This was a mistake. Strong Belvas ate too many locusts. There was a queasy look on Belvas's broad, brown face. Strong Belvas needs milk. Hisdar ignored the eunuch. Magnificence, the people of Meereen have come to celebrate our union. You heard them cheering you. Do not cast away their love. It was my floppy ears they cheered, not me. Take me from this abattoir, husband. She could hear the boar snorting, the shouts of the spearmen, the crack of the pitmaster's whip. Sweet lady, no. Stay only a while longer. For the folly and one last match. Close your eyes. No one will see. They will be watching Belako and Gorgor. This is no time for... A shadow rippled across his face. The tumult and the shouting died. 10,000 voices stilled. Every eye turned skyward. A warm wind brushed Dany's cheeks, and above the beating of her heart she heard the sound of wings. 2 spearmen dashed for shelter. The pitmaster froze where he stood. The boar went snuffling back to Barcena. Strong Belvas gave a moan, stumbled from his seat, and fell to his knees. Above them all the dragon turned, dark against the sun. His scales were black, his eyes and horns and spinal plates blood red. Ever the largest of her 3, in the wild, Drogon had grown larger still. His wings stretched 20 feet from tip to tip, black as jet. He flapped them once as he swept back above the sands, and the sound was like a clap of thunder. The boar raised his head, snorting, and flame engulfed him, black fire shot with red. Then he felt the wash of heat 30 feet away. The beast's dying scream sounded almost human. Drogon landed on the carcass and sank his claws into the smoking flesh. As he began to feed, he made no distinction between Barcena and the bear. "Oh gods!" moaned Reznak. "He's eating her!" The seneschal covered his mouth. Strong Belvas was retching noisily. A queer look passed across his Darza-Lorak's long, pale face. Part fear, part lust, part rapture. He licked his lips. Then he could see the pals streaming up the steps, clutching their tokars and tripping over the fringes in their haste to be away. Others followed. Some ran, shoving at one another. More stayed in their seats. As you might have noticed, the sons of the Harpy do not emerge from the crowd to randomly murder everyone. Dany herself chooses to leave the place and takes off her floppy ears. Belvas gets sick, and Drogon appears. A flash of weird emotions passed through Hisdar's face, showing what he actually is, a sadist that hides his tendencies behind charm and wit. Why did I say that the showrunners ruined Drogon's arrival at the pit? Because Dany is not some damsel in distress her dragon has to save. No. She faces Drogon herself, symbolically facing herself and her fears of her draconic nature, and tames it. One man took it on himself to be a hero. He was one of the spearmen sent out to drive the boar back to his pen. Perhaps he was drunk or mad. Perhaps he had loved Barcena Blackhair from afar, or had heard some whisper of the girl Hazea. Perhaps he was just some common man who wanted bards to sing of him. He darted forward, his boar spear in his hands. Red sun kicked up beneath his heels, and shouts rang out from the seats. Drogon raised his head, blood dripping from his teeth. The hero leapt onto his back and drove the iron spear point down at the base of the dragon's long, scaled neck. Dany and Drogon screamed as one. The hero leaned into his spear, using his weight to twist the point in deeper. Drogon arched upward with a hiss of pain. His tail lashed sideways. She watched his head crane around at the end of that long serpentine neck, saw his black wings unfold. The dragon slayer lost his footing and went tumbling to the sand. He was trying to struggle back to his feet when the dragon's teeth closed hard around his forearm. "No!" was all the man had time to shout. Drogon wrenched his arm from his shoulder and tossed it aside as a dog might toss a rodent in a rat pit. "Kill it!" His Darzelorak shouted to the other spearmen. "Kill the beast!" Sir Barristan held her tightly. "Look away, your grace." "Let me go!" Dany twisted from his grasp. The world seemed to slow as she cleared the parapet. When she landed in the pit, she lost a sandal. Running, she could feel the sand between her toes, hot and rough. Sir Barristan was calling after her. Strong Belvas was still vomiting. She ran faster. The spearmen were running too. Some were rushing towards the dragon, spears in hand. Others were rushing away, throwing down the weapons as they fled. The hero was jerking on the sand, the bright blood pouring from the ragged stump of his shoulder. His spear remained in Drogon's back, wobbling as the dragon bat his wings. Smoke rose from the wound. As the other spears closed in, the dragon spat fire, bathing two men in black flame. His tail lashed sideways and caught the pitmaster, creeping up behind him, breaking him in two. Another attacker stabbed at his eyes until the dragon caught him in his jaws and tore his belly out. The Mirinis were screaming, cursing, howling. Then he could hear someone pounding after her. "Dragon!" she screamed. "Dragon!" His head turned. Smoke rose between his teeth. His blood was smoking too, where it dripped upon the ground. He beat his wings again, sending up a choking storm of scarlet sand. Then he stumbled into the hot red cloud, coughing. He snapped. "No!" was all that she had time to say. "No, not me, don't you know me?" The black teeth closed inches from her face. He meant to tear my head off. The sand was in her eyes. She stumbled over the pitmaster's corpse and fell on her backside. Drogon roared. The sound filled the pit. A furnace wind engulfed her. The dragon's long-scaled neck stretched toward her. When his mouth opened, she could see bits of broken bone and charred flesh between his black teeth. His eyes were molten. "I am looking into hell, but I dare not look away." She had never been so certain of anything. "If I run from him, he will burn me and devour me." In Westeros, the Septon spoke of 7 hells and 7 heavens, but the 7 kingdoms and their gods were far away. If she died here, then he wondered, would the horse god of the Dothraki part the grass and claim her for his starry Kalasar, so she might ride the Nightlands beside her sun and stars? Or would the angry gods of Gis send their harpies to seize her soul and drag her down to torment? Drogon roared full in her face, his breath hot enough to blister skin. Off to her right, Dany heard Barristan Selmy shouting, "Me! Try me! Over here! Me!" In the smoldering red pits of Drogon's eyes, Dany saw her own reflection. How small she looked, how weak, and frail, and scared. "I cannot let him see my fear." She scrabbled in the sand, pushing against the pitmaster's corpse, and her fingers brushed against the handle of his whip. Touching it made her feel braver. The leather was warm, alive. Drogon roared again, the sound so loud that she almost dropped the whip. His teeth snapped at her. Dany hit him. "No!" she screamed, swinging the lash with all the strength that she had in her. The dragon jerked his head back. "No!" she screamed again. "No!" The barbs ragged along his snout. Drogon rose, his wings covering her in shadow. Dany swung the lash at his scaled belly, back and forth, until her arm began to ache. His long serpentine neck bent like an archer's bow. With a hiss, he spat black fire down at her. Dany darted underneath the flames, swinging the whip and shouting, "No! No! No! Get down!" His answering roar was full of fear and fury, full of pain. His wings beat once, twice, and folded. The dragon gave out one last hiss and stretched out flat upon his belly. Black blood was flowing from the wound where the spear had pierced him, smoking where it dripped onto the scorched sands. "He is fire made flesh," she thought. "And so am I." Daenerys Targaryen vaulted onto the dragon's back, seized the spear, and ripped it out. The point was half melted, the iron red hot, glowing. She flung it aside. Drogon twisted under her, his muscles rippling as he gathered his strength. The air was thick with sand. Then he could not see, she could not breathe, she could not think. The black wings cracked like thunder, and suddenly the scarlet suns were falling away beneath her. Dizzy, Dany closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she glimpsed the Myrinis beneath her, through a haze of tears and dust, pouring up the steps and out into the streets. The lash was still in her hand. She flicked it against Drogon's neck and cried, "Higher!" Her other hand clutched at his scales, her fingers scrabbling for perches. Drogon's wide black wings bat the air. Then he could feel the heat of him between her thighs. Her heart felt as if it were about to burst. Yes, she thought. Yes, now, do it, take me, fly! Dany's only appearance in this episode is her loss on what I assume is the Dothraki Sea. Drogon does not want to take her back to Meereen because he is injured and lazy, and she is later circled by a Dothraki Khalasar. So much for a whole chapter spent on recollections. Show Dany can't possibly have them because the whole conflict of this story was the fighting pits. Book Dany finds herself on the Dothraki Sea once more, and since Drogon would not take her back to Meereen, she decides to go back by foot. As she walks, memories, ghosts, and her conscience follow her. Off in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound made her feel sad and lonely, but no less hungry. As the moon rose above the grasslands, Dany slipped at last into a restless sleep. She dreamed. All her cares fell away from her, and all her pains as well, and she seemed to float upward into the sky. She was flying once again, spinning, laughing, dancing, as the stars wheeled around her and whispered secrets in her ear. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Quaeve, Dany called. Where are you, Quaeve? Then she saw. Her mask is made of starlight. Remember who you are, Daenerys, the stars whispered in a woman's voice. The dragons know. Do you? She dreamt of her dead brother. Viserys looked just as he had the last time she'd seen him. His mouth was twisted in anguish, his hair was burned, and his face was black and smoking, where the molten gold had run down across his brow and cheeks and into his eyes. You are dead, Dany said. Murdered. Though his lips never moved, somehow she could hear his voice, whispering in her ear. You never mourned me, sister. It is hard to die unmourned. I loved you once. Once, he said, so bitterly it made her shudder. You were supposed to be my wife, to bear me children with silver hair and purple eyes, to keep the blood of the dragon pure. I took care of you. I taught you who you were. I fed you. I sold our mother's crown to keep you fed. You hurt me. You frightened me. Only when you walked the dragon, I loved you. You sold me. You betrayed me. No, you were the betrayer. You turned against me, against your own blood. They cheated me, your horsey husband and his stinking savages. They were cheats and liars. They promised me a golden crown and gave me this. He touched the molten gold that was creeping down his face, and smoke rose from his finger. You could have had your crown, Dany told him. My sun and stars would have won it for you, if only you had waited. I waited long enough. I waited my whole life. I was their king, their rightful king. They laughed at me. You should have stayed in Pentos with Magister Illyrio. Khal Drogo had to present me to the Dosh Khaleen, but you did not have to ride with us. That was your choice. Your mistake. Do you want to wake the dragon, you stupid little whore? Drogo's Khalasar was mine. I bought them from him, 100,000 screamers. I paid for them with your maidenhead. You never understood. The Dothraki do not buy and sell. They give gifts and receive them. If you had waited. I did wait. For my crown, for my throne, for you. All these years, and all I ever got was a pot of molten gold. Why did they give the dragon's egg to you? They should have been mine. If I had the dragon, I would have taught the world the meaning of our words. Viserys began to laugh, until his jaw fell away from his face, smoking, and blood and molten gold ran from his mouth. I am the blood of the dragon, she told the glass aloud. Once, the grass whispered back, until you chained your dragons in the dark. Dragon killed a little girl. Her name. Then he could not recall the child's name. That made her so sad that she would have cried if all her tears had not been burned away. I will never have a little girl. I was the mother of dragons. Aye, the grass said. But you turned against your children. In the stream, or out of it, I must keep walking. Water flows downhill. The stream will take me to the river, and the river will take me home. Except it wouldn't. Not truly. Mirin was not her home, and never would be. It was a city of strange men with strange gods and stranger hair, of slavers wrapped in French tokars, where grace was earned through whoring, butchery was art, and dog was a delicacy. Mirin would always be the Harpy's city, and Daenerys could not be a Harpy. Never, said the grass, in the gruff tones of Jorah Mormont. You were warned, your grace. Let the city be, I said. Your war is in Westeros, I told you. The voice was no more than a whisper, yet somehow Dany felt that he was walking just behind her. My bear, she thought, my sweet old bear, who loved me and betrayed me. She had missed him so. She wanted to see his ugly face, to wrap her arms around him and press herself against his chest. But she knew that if she turned around, Ser Jorah would be gone. I am dreaming, she said. A waking dream, a walking dream. I am alone and lost. Lost, because you lingered, in a place that you were never meant to be, murmured Ser Jorah, as softly as the wind. Alone, because you sent me from your side. You betrayed me. You informed on me for gold, for home. Home was all I ever wanted. And me. You wanted me. Then I had seen it in his eyes. I did, the grass whispered, sadly. You kissed me. I never said you could, but you did. You sold me to my enemies, but you meant it when you kissed me. I gave you good counsel. Save your spears and swords for the 7 kingdoms, I told you. Leave Mirin to the Mirinese and go west, I said. You would not listen. I had to take Mirin or see my children starve along the march. And I could still see the trail of corpses she had left behind her crossing the red waste. It was not a sight she wished to see again. I had to take Mirin to feed my people. You took Mirin, he told her, yet you still lingered. To be a queen. You are a queen, her bear said, in Westeros. It is such a long way, she complained. I was tired, Jorah. I was weary of war. I wanted to rest, to laugh, to plant trees and see them grow. I am only a young girl. No. You are the blood of the dragon. The whispering was growing fainter, as if Ser Jorah were falling further behind. Dragons plant no trees. Remember that. Remember who you are, what you were made to be. Remember your words. Fire and blood. Daenerys told the swaying grass. Through the grass came a soft silvery tinkling. Bells, Dany thought, smiling, remembering Khal Drogo, her son and stairs, and the bells he braided into his hair. When the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the seas go dry and mountains blow in the wind like leaves, when my womb quickens again and I bear a living child, Khal Drogo will return to me. But none of these things had happened. Bells, Dany thought again. Her blood riders had found her. Ago, she whispered. Drogo, Carroll. Might Dario have come with them? The green sea opened. A rider appeared. His bride was black and shiny, his skin as dark as burnished copper, his eyes the shape of bitter almonds. Bells sang in his hair. He wore a medallion belt and painted vest, with an arak on one hip and a whip on the other. A hunting bow and a quiver of arrows were slung from his saddle. One rider, and alone. A scout. He was one who rode before the Khalasar to find the game and the good green grass, and sniff out foes wherever they might hide. If he found her there, he would kill her, rape her, or enslave her. At best, he would send her back to the crowns of the Doshkalin, where good Khaleesi were supposed to go when their Khals had died. He did not see her, though. The grass concealed her, and he was looking elsewhere. Dany followed his eyes, and there the shadow flew, with wings spread wide. The dragon was a mile off, and yet the scout stood frozen until his stallion began to weaken in fear. Then he woke as if from a dream, wheeled his mount about, and raced off through the tall grass at a gallop. Dany watched him go. When the sound of his hoofs had faded away to silence, she began to shout. She called until her voice was hoarse. And Drogon came, snorting plumes of smoke. The grass bowed down before him. Dany leapt onto his back. She stank of blood and sweat and fear, but none of that mattered. To go forward. I must go back, she said. Her bare legs tightened around the dragon's neck. She kicked him, and Drogon threw himself into the sky. Her whip was gone, so she used her hands and feet and turned him north by east, the way the scout had gone. Drogon went willingly enough. Perhaps he smelled the rider's fear. The carcass was too heavy for him to bear back to his lair, so Drogon consumed his kill there, tearing at the charred flesh as the grasses burned around them, the air thick with drifting smoke and the smell of burnt horsehair. Dany, starved, slid off his back and ate with him, ripping chunks of smoking meat from the dead corpse with bare, burnt hands. In Meereen I was a queen in silk, nibbling on staffled dates and honeyed lamb, she remembered. What would my noble husband think if he could see me now? Hizdahr would be horrified, no doubt. But Dario would laugh, carve off a hunk of horsemeat with his arak, and squat down to eat beside her. As the western sky turned the color of a blood bruise, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Dany rose, wiped her hands on her ragged under-tunic, and went to stand behind her dragon. That was how Kaljako found her, when 100 mounted warriors emerged from the drifting smoke. A Dance with Dragons is a moment when Dany's story starts getting more and more connected with that of other POV characters, setting stage for her being more and more integrated with the main storyline. Several Westerosi try to reach her for various reasons, and the film convergence of these storylines will be evident in the Winds of Winter. This video is already so goddamn long that I decided to shorten this segment. As such, there will be no quotes from the books and only short summaries. Following Tyrion Lannister's escape from Westeros and subsequent exile, he is taken in by Illyrio Mopatis, the same man who sold Daenerys into bridal slavery in Book 1. His goal is to join Tyrion with his own entourage in snatching Dany away from Meereen, so that she can marry her alleged nephew, young Griff, son of Rhaegar, who apparently miraculously survived having his head smashed against the wall. Tyrion makes it on board of Shy Maid, which carries, among others, Jon Connington and the long-lost alleged princeling, who believes that Daenerys will drop everything to marry him. When the team stops in Volantis, we learn that Dany's abolitionist campaign reached the first daughter of Valyria, and she is proclaimed as Azor Ahai Reborn by the head priest of R'hllor. The slaves worship Dany, but the masters fuel horrible propaganda against her. Tyrion is later kidnapped by Jorah Mormont, who wants to deliver him to Daenerys, perhaps in hopes for a pardon. The widow of the waterfront tells them that the slaves of Volantis wait for Dany. Thus, it is more than likely that Daenerys will make a stop in Volantis in Winds. Tyrion, Jorah and Penny are enslaved and bought by Yezan Zokagas. They are stationed with him outside of Meereen's walls, and they learn that Dany married Hizdahr. Tyrion remarks on the irony of the fact that Dany saved him from lions. Afterwards, Tyrion decides to play the Game of Thrones and make the Second Sons rejoin Daenerys. Following Dany's departure from Meereen, Barristan becomes our primary POV at her court. Hizdahr wields more and more influence. Skahas Mokandak, the Shave-Pate, convinces Barristan that Hizdahr's confectioner poisoned the locusts, and tells him that Volantis launched its fleet against Meereen. Barristan warns Quentyn to leave Meereen, which his damas won't do, and confronts Hizdahr, later arresting him. Then we learn that the dragons were set loose. After Hizdahr is imprisoned, the killings of the sons of the Harpy resume, and Skahas wants to kill the child hostages as retaliation, but Barristan doesn't let him. Eventually, it turns out that they will have to fight a battle, as the Yonkish men send corpses infected with the Pale Mare to Meereen. Jon Connington was one of Rhaegar's friends and a former Hand of the King to Daenerys Targaryen, who had been exiled and was believed to have drunk himself to death. In reality, Jon Con was recruited by Illyrio to raise young Griff, the alleged son of Rhaegar, and help him reclaim the Iron Throne. The plan was to have Aegon and Daenerys marry, but after Tyrion convinced the boy to go to Westeros without her, Jon Con obliged. He, however, does not want Aegon to marry anyone else, in hopes that Dany might yet go west. In Dany's chapters, we learn that Dorne signed a secret pact, according to which Viserys was to marry Arianne, but after his death in Vaes Dothrak, it fell to Quentyn to fulfill this pact. He is sent to Meereen to snatch Dany from there and vouch for her hand. He hears propaganda about Dany and begins fearing her, but when he does meet her, his opinion changes drastically. He then decides to tame Dany's dragons, and we all know how that ends. Victarion is dispatched to Meereen in order to deliver Daenerys to his brother Euron as a bride, but at some point Victarion decides to take her as his bride instead. It's worth noting that Victarion has the Dragon Binder, a horn that is supposed to tame dragons. Now that the dragons were set loose by Damas Quentyn, Victarion may sound the horn. I have suspected that this will be the longest and most challenging part of my analysis. It took me 3 weeks to finish it, and I already removed a lot from the script. This is already my longest video to date, and most people probably won't make it this far, so whatever. The core problem of how A Dance with Dragons was adapted on screen was that there was no genuine conflict. There was no attempt at compromise, there was no genuine threat from the Sons of the Harpy, and the bulk of other conflicts, such as Volantis, Karth, and Yunkai going to war against Dany, were omitted. All that was substituted with the fighting pits problem, which was unreasonably dragged across the entire season. Dany's mischaracterization is probably at its peak here, and it's clear that the showrunners were not at all invested in this story. They probably weren't invested in all of Game of Thrones anymore, as evident by how other storylines were similarly butchered, but their ego prevented them from handing the show to someone else. More things were removed from the story than retained and substituted with narrative developments far less compelling than those in the books. I plan to make another video where I take everything we have discussed in this several hours long series, so as of now I will offer no general conclusions on show Daenerys as a whole. Thanks for watching. Remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share, so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. And remember, Phoenix rises from the ashes, and ashes always stand on top.